Abduction at Area 51. Chapter 1. Echoes from the Void. Douglas Clark's fingers danced across the holographic display, his eyes darting between cascading strings of data and the pulsating representation of the rift. The control room hummed with the quiet efficiency of advanced technology, a stark contrast to the vast Nevada desert just beyond the reinforced walls of Area 51. "Come on, show me something new," Doug muttered, his voice barely audible above the soft whir of cooling fans. He'd spent countless hours, years really, staring at these screens, searching for patterns in the cosmic noise. But tonight felt different. There was an electricity in the air, a tension that set his nerves on edge. A flash of red caught his eye. Doug leaned in, his heart rate quickening. What the hell? The rift's energy signature was spiking, oscillating in a pattern he'd never seen before. He tapped a series of commands, bringing up historical data for comparison. Nothing matched. This was unprecedented. "Dr. Clark," a young technician approached, her face pale in the blue glow of the monitors. "Are you seeing this?" Doug nodded, not taking his eyes off the screen. "I'm seeing it, Laurie, but I'm not sure I believe it." He straightened, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. "Get Albert down here, now!" As Laurie hurried to make the call, Doug's mind raced. After decades of studying the rift, they might finally be on the verge of a breakthrough, or a catastrophe. In this line of work, the two often went hand in hand. The thought triggered a memory, vivid and unbidden. His father's voice strained with excitement and fear. "Douglas, my boy, we're standing on the edge of history. Area 51, July 7th, 1951. Jonathan Clark stood at the edge of the cracked desert earth, his eyes fixed on the shimmering distortion before him. It was like a heat haze, but more solid, more purposeful. The air crackled with an energy that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. "My God!" breathed Colonel Harrison, standing beside him. "What are we looking at, Dr. Clark?" Jonathan shook his head, unable to tear his gaze away from the phenomenon. "I'm not entirely sure, Colonel. But if I had to guess, I'd say we're looking at a tear in the fabric of space-time itself." A young soldier nearby let out a nervous laugh, like something out of a science fiction novel. "Right, Doc? Science fiction." Jonathan finally turned, fixing the soldier with a penetrating stare. "Young man, what we're witnessing here is science fact. We just haven't caught up to it yet." He stepped closer to the rift, ignoring the colonel's warning hand on his arm. The distortion seemed to pulse, almost as if it were alive. "This changes everything," Jonathan whispered. "Our understanding of physics, of the universe itself. And if we can harness it." He trailed off, mind reeling with the possibilities. Colonel Harrison cleared his throat. "Dr. Clark, I don't need to remind you of the sensitive nature of this discovery. Everything that happens here is classified at the highest level." Jonathan nodded absently, already pulling a notebook from his pocket. "Of course, Colonel. But make no mistake, this is bigger than any one nation or government. What we do here could shape the future of humanity." As he began scribbling furiously, Jonathan glanced up at the shimmering rift once more. For a moment he could have sworn he saw something move on the other side, a fleeting shadow that defied explanation. He shivered, despite the desert heat. Whatever lay beyond that cosmic curtain, Jonathan Clark knew his life, and the world, would never be the same. Doug blinked, shaking off the memory, as Albert burst into the control room, looking disheveled and out of breath. "What's the emergency?" Albert demanded, peering at the screens. His eyes widened as he took in the data. "My God, Doug, is this for real?" "As real as it gets," Doug confirmed, gesturing to the holographic display. "The rift's energy output has increased by in the last hour alone. And look at these oscillation patterns, they're nothing like we've seen before." Albert leaned in, his brow furrowed. "It's almost like it's communicating," Doug finished. The two men exchanged a look, years of friendship, and shared research allowing them to reach the same conclusion simultaneously. "We need to run more tests," Albert said, already moving to a nearby workstation. "If this is what we think it is, it could be the breakthrough we've been waiting for," Doug agreed. He hesitated, then added, "Or it could be a threat we're not prepared for." As if in response, the rift's holographic representation flared brightly, casting eerie shadows across the room. Alarms began to blare, their urgent wail echoing through the facility. "Doug!" Laurie called out, her voice tight with panic. "We're detecting massive energy fluctuations. The containment field is barely holding." Doug's mind raced, years of contingency planning kicking into high gear. "Initiate Protocol Omega," he ordered, his voice calm despite the chaos unfolding around him, "and get me a secure line to the Pentagon. They need to know what's happening here." As the control room erupted into frenzied activity, Doug found his gaze drawn to an old photograph on his desk. It showed a much younger version of himself standing beside his father, both of them grinning in front of a nondescript hangar. The weight of the Clark family legacy had never felt heavier than in this moment. "What have we done, Dad?" Doug murmured, his words lost in the din of alarms and shouted orders. "And what's coming through that rift?" The holographic rift pulsed once more, a violent surge of energy that made the very air seem to ripple. And in that instant, Douglas Clark knew with chilling certainty that everything was about to change. The echoes from the void had become a deafening roar, and humanity's response would determine the fate of not just Area but potentially the entire world. As he turned to face the growing crisis, Doug couldn't shake the feeling that this was what his entire life had been leading up to. The next few hours would test everything he knew, everything he believed in. And somewhere deep in the recesses of his mind, a small voice whispered a terrifying question: "Are we ready for what comes next?" Chapter 2. Prodigal Son. The desert sun beat down mercilessly as Trent Clark stepped out of the unmarked government vehicle. He squinted against the glare, taking in the unremarkable facade of what appeared to be a standard military installation. Only the barely perceptible shimmer of an advanced camouflage field hinted at the true nature of the facility before him. "Welcome to Area 51, Mr. Clark," said the stone-faced security officer who had driven him from the remote airstrip. "Your father is expecting you." Trent nodded, shouldering his backpack. "I bet he is," he muttered, unable to keep the edge from his voice. It had been 2 years since he'd last seen his father in person, and the weight of unspoken words and unanswered questions hung heavy between them. As he followed the officer towards the main entrance, Trent's mind wandered to the countless times he'd imagined this moment. What secrets lay behind those nondescript walls? What mysteries had consumed his father's life and by extension shaped his own? The cool air inside the facility was a sharp contrast to the Nevada heat. Trent's footsteps echoed in the stark corridor as they made their way deeper into the complex. With each security checkpoint they passed, the young man felt a growing sense of anticipation and apprehension. Finally, they reached a set of reinforced doors marked Executive Operations. The security officer nodded to Trent. "Dr. Clark is waiting for you inside." Taking a deep breath, Trent pushed through the doors. The room beyond was a hive of activity filled with advanced computer terminals and holographic displays. And there, in the center of it all, stood Douglas Clark. For a moment, father and son simply stared at each other, the years of distance stretching between them like a chasm. Then Doug stepped forward, a tentative smile on his face. "Trent," he said, his voice a mix of warmth and uncertainty. "It's good to see you, son." Trent nodded stiffly. "Hey, Dad, nice office you've got here." Doug chuckled, a sound slightly forced. "Well, it's not exactly a corner office with a view, but it has its perks." He gestured around the room. "Welcome to the heart of Area 51. As if on cue, one of the nearby holographic displays flared to life, showing a complex array of data streams and pulsating energy signatures. Trent's eyes widened, his scientific curiosity momentarily overriding his emotional guardedness. "Is that—" he began, stepping closer to the display. Doug nodded, a hint of pride in his voice. "The rift, or at least our best attempt at visualizing it." He paused, studying his son's reaction. "I know you have questions, Trent. I'm hoping that while you're here I can finally provide some answers." Trent turned back to his father, his expression a mix of fascination and lingering resentment. "That's why I came, isn't it? To finally learn the truth about what you've been doing all these years. What was so important that you missed every birthday, every graduation?" Doug winced, the pain evident in his eyes. "I know I have a lot to make up for, but what we're doing here, Trent, it's bigger than you can imagine. It's—" He was cut off by a sudden alarm blaring through the room. The holographic display of the rift flickered, its usually steady pulse becoming erratic. "Dr. Clark," called out a nearby technician. "We're detecting another energy spike." Doug's demeanor instantly shifted, the concerned father replaced by the focused scientist. "Talk to me, Laurie. What are we looking at?" As Doug rushed to the main control panel, Trent found himself swept up in the sudden flurry of activity. He watched in awe as his father coordinated the response, fingers flying over holographic controls, issuing rapid-fire orders to his team. "Containment fields at maximum," Doug called out. "Redirect power from non-essential systems. We need to stabilize the rift's energy output before—" A violent tremor shook the facility, causing Trent to stumble. He grabbed onto a nearby console to steady himself, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and excitement. "Dad!" he called out, his voice barely audible over the blaring alarms. "What's happening?" Doug looked up, meeting his son's gaze. For a moment the mask of the scientist slipped, and Trent saw a flicker of the father he remembered from his childhood. Brilliant, passionate, and just a little bit scared of the forces he was dealing with. "Something's coming through, son," Doug said, his voice tight. "And I'm not sure we're ready for it." As if to punctuate his words, the holographic display erupted in a cascade of swirling energy. The very air seemed to crackle with an otherworldly electricity, and Trent felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. "Dr. Clark," called out Albert, rushing into the room. "The rift's stability is critical. We need to evacuate non-essential personnel immediately." Doug nodded, his expression grim. "Initiate emergency protocols. Get everyone to the secure bunkers." He turned to Trent, conflict evident in his eyes. "Trent, I need you to go with the evacuation team. It's not safe here." Trent stood his ground, shaking his head. "No way, Dad. I didn't come all this way to be shuffled off at the first sign of trouble. I want to help." For a moment, Doug looked like he might argue. Then a small, proud smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "You really are your father's son, aren't you?" He nodded to Albert. "Get him a security clearance. If he's staying, he might as well make himself useful." As Albert hurried to comply, Doug turned back to the main display. "All right, people, let's stabilize this thing. The last thing we need is an interdimensional incident on our hands." Trent moved to his father's side, his earlier resentment momentarily forgotten in the face of the unfolding crisis. Together, father and son stood at the precipice of the unknown, ready to face whatever might emerge from the depths of the cosmos. The rift pulsed once more, a blinding flash of energy that seemed to bend the very fabric of reality. And as the light faded, leaving spots dancing in Trent's vision, he realized that his life, and perhaps the fate of the entire world, was about to change forever. "Dad," he whispered, his voice a mix of awe and trepidation. "What have you gotten us into?" Doug's hand found Trent's shoulder, squeezing it reassuringly. "I don't know, son, but whatever it is, we'll face it together. That's a promise." As the alarms continued to blare and the facility shook with another tremor, Trent couldn't help but feel a surge of excitement beneath his fear. This was it, the moment he'd been waiting for his entire life. The truth about his father's work, about Area 51, about the very nature of the universe itself, was about to be revealed. And as he looked at the determination on his father's face, Trent knew that whatever came next, he was exactly where he needed to be. The prodigal son had returned, just in time for the adventure of a lifetime. Chapter 3, The Majestic Deception. As the alarms subsided and the immediate crisis passed, Doug led Trent deeper into the heart of Area 51. They passed through a series of security checkpoints, each more advanced than the last, until they reached a vast circular chamber dominated by a glowing holographic representation of the rift. "Welcome to the Nexus," Doug said, his voice tinged with pride. "This is where we coordinate all our research on the rift and other matters." Trent's eyes widened as he took in the scene. A dozen scientists and technicians bustled around the room, their faces illuminated by the soft blue glow of holographic displays. At the center of it all stood a tall, lanky man with wild grey hair and thick-rimmed glasses. "Ah, the prodigal son returns," the man exclaimed, striding over to them with a manic grin. "I'm Albert, your father's right-hand man and occasional voice of reason, though he rarely listens." Doug rolled his eyes good-naturedly. "Trent, this is Dr. Albert Rosenberg. He's been with the project almost as long as I have." "A pleasure to finally meet you, young Clark," Albert said, pumping Trent's hand enthusiastically. "Your father's told us so much about you, though I must say you're a bit taller than I expected. Must get that from your mother's side." Trent couldn't help but smile at Albert's infectious energy. "Nice to meet you too, Dr. Rosenberg. I hope you can fill in some of the blanks my father's left over the years." "Oh, we have so much to show you," Albert said, his eyes twinkling. "But first, let's bring you up to speed on our latest predicament." He led them to a large monitor displaying a world map dotted with pulsing red lights. "These are confirmed UFO sightings from the past month alone." "Notice anything unusual?" Trent studied the map, his brow furrowing. "There, increasing and clustering around certain areas." "Precisely," Albert exclaimed. "We've seen a 200% uptick in sightings over the last quarter, and they're not random. They're focusing on key ley line intersections and areas of high electromagnetic activity." "But that's impossible," Trent said, shaking his head. "UFOs aren't real. They're just misidentified natural phenomena or experimental aircraft, right?" Doug and Albert exchanged a knowing look. "That's what we want the public to believe," Doug said quietly. "It's called the Majestic Deception, a carefully orchestrated campaign of misinformation and plausible deniability." Trent felt a chill run down his spine. "You're saying they're real, actual alien spacecraft?" "Some of them," Albert said, nodding. "Others are our own experimental craft, reverse-engineered from recovered alien technology. The key is to keep the public guessing, to maintain a shroud of doubt and skepticism." "But why?" Trent asked, his voice rising. "If aliens are real, if we have proof, doesn't the world deserve to know?" Doug placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "It's not that simple, Trent. The truth. It could destabilize everything, governments, religions, the very fabric of society. We're not just protecting secrets here. We're protecting humanity from a truth it might not be ready to face." Trent shrugged off his father's hand, anger flashing in his eyes. "And who made you the arbiter of what humanity is ready for? This is wrong, Dad. It's a betrayal of everything science stands for." Before Doug could respond, a loud beep emanated from the central holographic display. The rift's representation was pulsing erratically, its usual blue glow shot through with angry red streaks. "Dr. Clark," called out a young woman with close-cropped hair and intense eyes, "we're detecting anomalous energy fluctuations in the rift. It's unlike anything we've seen before." Doug rushed to her side, Trent and Albert close behind. Talk to me, Dr. Chen. What are we looking at? Dr. Chen's fingers flew over her keyboard as she brought up a series of complex equations and energy readings. The rift's quantum stability is fluctuating wildly. It's as if something is trying to force its way through from the other side. A hush fell over the nexus as the implications of her words sank in. For years they had studied the rift, probed its secrets, even managed to send rudimentary probes through, but never had anything attempted to cross over from the other side. Could it be one of our probes returning? Albert asked, his usual jovial tone replaced by tense professionalism. Dr. Chen shook her head. Negative. The energy signature is completely alien. And it's massive. Whatever's coming through, it's big. Doug's face was grim as he turned to address the room. Initiate Protocol Omega. I want all non-essential personnel evacuated to the secure bunkers immediately. Dr. Chen, work with Albert to stabilize the rift. Use whatever means necessary. As the Nexus erupted into controlled chaos, Trent grabbed his father's arm. Dad, what's Protocol Omega? What's really going on here? Doug hesitated, conflict clear in his eyes. Then he seemed to come to a decision. Follow me, he said, leading Trent to a secure elevator at the back of the room. It's time you knew the whole truth. The elevator descended rapidly, taking them deep beneath the Earth's surface. When the doors opened, Trent found himself in a vast underground hangar. And there, bathed in harsh fluorescent light, stood a sight that took his breath away. It was unmistakably a spacecraft, but like nothing Trent had ever seen. Its sleek, organic curves seemed to defy conventional engineering. The metal of its hull shimmered with an otherworldly iridescence. This, Doug said softly, is what we recovered from Roswell in 1947. It's what started everything. And now, after decades of study, we're on the verge of understanding how it works. Trent approached the craft slowly, his mind reeling. He reached out a tentative hand, stopping just short of touching its surface. It's beautiful, he whispered. And terrifying, Doug added, because if we can figure out how to use it, so can others. And not everyone has humanity's best interests at heart. A distant rumble shook the hangar, causing dust to rain down from the ceiling. Trent looked at his father, fear and excitement warring in his eyes. The rift. It's getting worse, isn't it? Doug nodded grimly. I'm afraid so, and I have a feeling that what's coming through, it might be looking for this. He gestured to the alien craft. We always knew this day might come. I hoped we'd be more prepared. What can I do? Trent asked, straightening his shoulders. Despite his earlier anger, he couldn't deny the gravity of the situation. This was bigger than his resentment, bigger than the lies and secrets. This was about the fate of humanity itself. Doug smiled, a mixture of pride and sadness in his eyes. That's my boy. Come on, we've got work to do. The fate of the world might just depend on what happens in the next few hours. As they hurried back to the elevator, Trent cast one last look at the alien spacecraft. It sat there, silent and inscrutable, a harbinger of a future that was rapidly becoming present. Whatever came next, he knew his life would never be the same. The elevator doors closed, and father and son ascended to face the coming storm together. Chapter 4, Quantum Whispers. The Nexus thrummed with nervous energy as Doug, Trent, and the core research team gathered around the central holographic display. The rift's representation pulsed steadily, its earlier erratic behavior temporarily stabilized. All right, people, Doug addressed the room, his voice carrying a mix of authority and anticipation. We've got a narrow window here. The rift's quantum stability has returned to baseline, but who knows how long that'll last. It's time we push beyond observation and take a more proactive approach. Albert raised an eyebrow. You mean? Doug nodded. We're going to attempt direct communication through the rift. A murmur of excitement rippled through the assembled scientists. Trent leaned in. his earlier anger at the deception momentarily forgotten in the face of potential scientific breakthrough. "How exactly do you communicate through a tear in space-time?" Trent asked, his curiosity getting the better of him. Dr. Chen stepped forward, her eyes bright with intellectual fervor. "We've developed a quantum entanglement-based system," she explained. "By creating pairs of entangled particles and sending one half through the rift, we hope to establish an instantaneous communication link, regardless of the physical distance involved." Trent's mind reeled at the implications. "But that's incredible. You're talking about faster-than-light communication. Do you have any idea what this could mean for science?" "For humanity." Doug finished, a wry smile on his face. "Oh, we have some idea, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. First, we need to see if it actually works." The team sprang into action, each member taking their position at various control stations around the Nexus. Trent watched in fascination as complex algorithms scrolled across screens and holographic readouts flickered with streams of data. "Quantum entanglement generator online," Dr. Chen called out. "Particle stream stable, we're ready to transmit." Doug took a deep breath, his hand hovering over the activation switch. "Here goes nothing," he muttered, then pressed the button. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, the rift's holographic representation began to shimmer, tendrils of energy reaching out from its core like ethereal fingers. "We're detecting a response," Albert shouted, his usual composure cracking with excitement. "Something on the other side is interacting with our particle stream." Trent leaned in, studying the incoming data. "These patterns, they're not random. There's a clear sequence repeating." Doug nodded, his expression intense. "Good catch, son. Dr. Chen, run it through the decryption algorithms. Let's see if we can make sense of this." As Dr. Chen worked, Trent turned to his father. "Dad, if this works, if you can actually communicate with whatever's on the other side of that rift, what then?" Doug's eyes remained fixed on the displays, but his voice softened. "Then, Trent, we take our first real step into a larger universe, for better or worse." Before Trent could respond, a sharp crack echoed through the Nexus. Sparks erupted from one of the nearby consoles, and the smell of ozone filled the air. "Energy spike," Dr. Chen called out, her fingers flying over her keyboard. "The rift is destabilizing again." The holographic display writhed, its once orderly representation of the rift twisting into chaotic patterns. And then, cutting through the cacophony of alarms and shouted orders, came a sound that made everyone freeze. It was a voice, or something like a voice. Distorted and alien, it echoed from every speaker in the room. "Have heard. We come. Prepare." As quickly as it came, the voice faded, leaving behind a stunned silence. The rift's display slowly returned to its normal state, the energy spikes subsiding. Did we just make first contact?" Albert whispered, his face pale. Doug's expression was grim. "I'm not sure contact is the right word. That felt more like an advance notice." Trent looked at his father, a chill running down his spine. "An advance notice of what?" Before Doug could answer, another alarm blared. This time, it was coming from a different system entirely. "Proximity alert," one of the technicians called out.
"We've got multiple bogies approaching the base perimeter."
Fast movers, unmarked aircraft. Doug's jaw tightened. "It seems our little experiment didn't go unnoticed." "Trent, stay close. Things are about to get complicated." As the Nexus erupted into a flurry of activity once more, Trent couldn't shake the feeling that they had just opened Pandora's box. The rift, the alien voice, and now unknown forces converging on Area 51, it was all connected, part of a cosmic puzzle they were only beginning to understand. "Dr. Clark," Dr. Chen called out, her voice tight with tension. "I've completed a preliminary analysis of the energy signatures we detected during the transmission." You need to see this." Doug hurried over, Trent close behind. As they studied the data, Trent saw his father's face pale. "This can't be right," Doug muttered. "These readings, they're identical to the ones we recorded from the Roswell craft." Trent's eyes widened. "You mean?" Doug nodded slowly. "Whatever's on the other side of that rift, it's the same species that visited Earth in 1947. And now, they're coming back." The implications hung heavy in the air. Years of secrecy, decades of research, all leading to this moment. As Trent looked around the room at the mix of fear and determination on the faces of the Area 51 team, he realized that he was witnessing history in the making. "So, what do we do now?" Trent asked, surprised by the steadiness in his own voice. Doug straightened, his eyes hardening with resolve. "Now, we prepare. For first contact, for invasion, for whatever comes through that rift. And we pray that all our years of work have made us ready for this moment." As if in response, the rift's holographic display pulsed once more, a silent reminder of the cosmic forces at play. In that instant, Trent understood the true weight of his father's work, the burden of knowledge that had kept Doug away for so many years. And as father and son stood side by side, facing the unknown together, Trent knew that his life and the fate of humanity would never be the same again. The quantum whispers from across the universe had become a clarion call. The only question that remained was, would Earth answer with open arms or raised fists? Chapter 5. Shadows in the Desert. The battered pickup truck rumbled to a stop in front of the Little Inn, its engine sputtering a final protest before falling silent. Jenny Hawkins stepped out, stretching her legs after the long drive. The desert heat hit her like a wall, and she squinted against the glare, taking in the sight of Rachel, Nevada. It wasn't much to look at, a handful of buildings scattered along a dusty main street, with the vast expanse of the Nevada desert stretching out in all directions. But to Jenny it represented the end of a long journey and the beginning of something else, something she couldn't quite define. She slung her backpack over her shoulder and headed into the diner, the tinkling of the bell above the door announcing her arrival. The handful of patrons inside, a mix of locals and UFO enthusiasts, by the looks of it, glanced up briefly before returning to their conversations. Jenny made her way to the counter, where a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense expression greeted her. "Welcome to Rachel, honey. You look like you could use a cold drink and a hot meal. What'll it be?" Jenny managed a tired smile. Both sound great, thanks. And I was wondering if you had any rooms available." The woman, Pat, according to her name tag, raised an eyebrow. "Staying a while, are you?" "Most folks just pass through on their way to gawk at the base." "I'm doing some research," Jenny said carefully. "Family history stuff." Pat's expression softened slightly. "Well, you've come to the right place for stories, that's for sure. Go ahead and take a seat. I'll bring you some food and we can talk about a room." As Jenny settled into a booth, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She glanced around the diner, but no one seemed to be paying her any particular attention. Still, the prickle at the back of her neck remained. Outside, a black SUV with tinted windows cruised slowly past the diner. Inside, two men in nondescript suits observed the new arrival. "That's her," the driver said, his voice low. "Jenny Hawkins, just like the boss said." His partner nodded, tapping something into a tablet. "Right on schedule. Keep an eye on her, but maintain distance. We don't want to spook her. Yet." The SUV continued down the road, turning off onto a side street and disappearing from view. Back in the diner, Jenny was halfway through a surprisingly good burger when the bell above the door chimed again. An older man walked in, his weathered face creased with worry. He made a beeline for Pat at the counter. "It happened again, Pat," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "Last night, the lights in the sky, the weird noises. And this morning I found 2 of my cows. Well, you know." Pat's face grew serious. "Mutilations." The man nodded grimly. Precision cuts. No blood, just like the others. Jenny couldn't help but lean in, straining to hear more. This was exactly the kind of thing she'd come here for, the strange, the unexplained, the pieces of a puzzle she'd been trying to solve for years. Pat noticed Jenny's interest and beckoned her over. "Jenny, this is old Bill. He's got a ranch just outside town. Bill, this is Jenny. She's doing some research on the area." Bill's roomy eyes fixed on Jenny, suddenly sharp and assessing. "Research, huh? What kind of research brings a young lady like you out to the middle of nowhere?" Jenny hesitated, then decided on honesty. "I'm looking into some family history. My grandmother, she used to tell me stories about this place, about strange lights in the sky, about people who went missing. I always thought they were just stories, but now..." Bill and Pat exchanged a look. "Your grandmother," Bill said slowly. "What was her name?" "Sarah," Jenny replied. "Sarah Hawkins, though her maiden name was Clark," Pat finished, her face pale. Sarah Clark. A heavy silence fell over the diner. Even the other patrons seemed to have gone quiet, as if the very mention of the name had sucked the air out of the room. "How did you know that?" Jenny asked, her heart racing. Before Pat could answer, a low rumble shook the building. Glasses rattled on shelves and dust drifted down from the ceiling. Everyone instinctively looked up, as if expecting to see something crashing through the roof. "What was that?" Jenny asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Bill's face was grim. "That, young lady, is why your grandmother's stories weren't just stories." Outside, the sky had taken on an ominous cast. Dark clouds roiled overhead, shot through with flashes of light that didn't look quite like normal lightning. The air felt charged, electric, as if the very atmosphere was holding its breath. Jenny stepped out onto the street, Pat and Bill close behind her. Other people were emerging from buildings, all staring up at the strange sky. And then, cutting through the eerie silence, came a sound that made Jenny's blood run cold. It was a low, pulsing hum, felt more than heard. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. And as it grew in intensity, Jenny felt a tugging sensation, as if some unseen force was trying to pull her upward. "Get inside," Bill shouted, grabbing Jenny's arm. "Everyone, get inside now." As they scrambled back into the diner, Jenny caught a glimpse of something in the sky. A shape, vast and indistinct, briefly visible through a break in the clouds. It was gone in an instant, but the image burned itself into her mind. Back inside, Pat was on the phone, her voice urgent. "Yes, it's happening again. Worse than before. We need..." She broke off, listening intently. "I understand. Yes, she's here. Just like they said she would be." Jenny's head was spinning. "What's going on?" "Who said I would be here?" Pat hung up the phone, her expression a mix of fear and determination. "Jenny, there's a lot you don't know. About your family, about this place, about what's really going on out there in the desert. But right now, we need to get you somewhere safe." "Safe from what?" Jenny demanded. Bill looked at her, his eyes grave. "From them. The ones your grandmother warned you about. The ones who've been watching us for longer than you can imagine." Another tremor shook the building, stronger this time. Out on the street, car alarms began to wail. "There's no more time," Pat said, grabbing a set of keys from behind the counter. "Bill, you know where to take her. I'll hold them off here if they come asking questions." Bill nodded, taking Jenny by the arm. "Come on, girl. Your grandmother knew this day might come. That's why she told you those stories. To prepare you." As Bill led her out the back door to a waiting jeep, Jenny's mind raced. This was supposed to be a simple research trip, a chance to connect with her family's past. Instead, she found herself plunging headlong into a mystery that seemed to encompass not just her family, but perhaps the fate of the entire world. The jeep roared to life, And as they sped out of Rachel towards the vast expanse of the desert, Jenny couldn't shake the feeling that she was leaving behind the last vestiges of her old life. Ahead lay the unknown, fraught with danger and secrets, and somewhere out there, beyond the shimmering heat haze of the desert, lay Area 51, the place where it all began, and where, Jenny now realized, her own story was inexorably leading her. The shadows in the desert were growing longer, and the truth they concealed was about to come to light. Chapter 6. Breach Protocol. The Nexus erupted into chaos as alarms blared from every console. The holographic representation of the rift writhed and pulsed. Its usual blue glow now shot through with angry red tendrils that seemed to reach out into the room itself. "Status report," Doug barked, his fingers flying over the main control panel. Dr. Chen's voice was tight with tension. "The rift's stability is critical, Dr. Clark. Energy levels are off the charts. We're detecting massive quantum fluctuations across all spectrums." Trent watched in awe and terror as the air around the hologram began to shimmer like heat waves rising from sun-baked asphalt. "Dad," he said, his voice barely audible over the cacophony of alarms. "What's happening?" Doug's face was grim. "What we've always feared, son, the rift is opening."
As if in response to his words, a blinding flash of light erupted from the center of the hologram.
Trent threw his arm up to shield his eyes, spots dancing in his vision. When he lowered it, he saw that the hologram had changed. Where before it had shown an abstract representation of the rift, now it displayed what looked like a live feed of something else. A vast, swirling vortex of energy filled the display, its edges crackling with otherworldly power. And at its center, barely visible through the maelstrom, were shapes. Indistinct at first, but growing clearer with each passing second. "My God," Albert whispered, his usual jovial demeanor replaced by wide-eyed shock. "Are those alien life forms?" Doug finished, his voice a mix of scientific awe and very human fear. "Prepare for full breach protocol. This is not a drill, people." The room erupted into a flurry of activity. Technicians raced to their stations, fingers flying over keyboards and holographic interfaces. Security personnel moved to secure the entrances, weapons at the ready. "Trent," Doug said, turning to his son, "I need you to go with Dr. Chen. She'll get you to the secure bunker." Trent shook his head, a stubborn set to his jaw. "No way, Dad. I'm staying right here." For a moment, Doug looked like he might argue. Then his expression softened, a hint of pride shining through the worry. "All right, but you stay close, and you do exactly as I say." "Understood?" Trent nodded, his heart racing with a mix of fear and excitement. Suddenly, a new alarm cut through the chaos. This one was different, deeper, more urgent. Trent saw his father's face pale. "Sir," one of the security officers called out, "we're detecting multiple breaches in the lower levels." "Something's coming through." Doug's jaw tightened. "Initiate full lockdown. I want blast doors sealed on every level. And get me a direct line to the Pentagon. We're going to need backup." As the team scrambled to comply, Trent felt a chill run down his spine. This was it. After decades of secrecy, of research, of preparation, the moment had finally arrived. Humanity's first true contact with an alien species. And it was happening right here, right now, in the depths of Area 51. The main screen flickered, shifting to a series of security camera feeds from the lower levels. Trent watched in fascinated horror as strange shadowy forms began to materialize in the corridors. They moved with an alien grace, their bodies seeming to shift and flow in ways that defied human physiology. "Dad," Trent whispered, "what are they?" Doug shook his head, his eyes never leaving the screen. "I don't know, son, but whatever they are, they're here now, and we need to be ready." As if on cue, one of the alien entities turned towards a camera. For a brief moment, Trent caught a glimpse of what might have been a face, a swirling mass of tentacles or tendrils, surrounding a cluster of glowing orbs that could have been eyes. Then the feed cut out, plunging that section of the facility into darkness. "We've lost contact with Level 7, a technician reported, her voice shaking. "All systems down." Doug's voice was steady, but Trent could see the tension in his father's shoulders. "Activate the emergency power. And prep the containment fields. If we can't stop them, we need to at least slow them down." Trent watched as his father coordinated the response, issuing rapid-fire orders and analyzing incoming data with lightning speed. For the first time, he truly understood why Doug had been chosen to lead this facility. This was a man born for crisis, his mind razor-sharp under pressure. A violent tremor shook the Nexus, nearly knocking Trent off his feet. He grabbed onto a nearby console to steady himself, watching in horror as cracks began to form in the reinforced walls. "The rift's energy is destabilizing the entire facility," Albert called out, his wild hair even more disheveled than usual. "If we don't contain it soon, this whole place could come down around our ears." Doug nodded grimly.
Divert all available power to the containment fields.
"We need to bottle this thing up before it tears a hole in reality itself." As the team worked feverishly to stabilize the rift, Trent noticed something odd on one of the security feeds. A group of soldiers was making its way through the upper levels, led by a man who didn't look like he belonged to any military unit Trent recognized. "Dad," he said, pointing to the screen. "Who are they?" Doug glanced at the feed, his expression darkening. "Trouble," he muttered. Then louder, "Albert, we've got company. Looks like our friends from the Silence Group decided to pay us a visit." Albert swore colourfully. "Brilliant timing as always. Should I initiate Protocol Zeta?" Doug hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Do it. But be discreet. The last thing we need is a firefight in the middle of an alien incursion." Trent's head was spinning. Aliens breaching the facility, mysterious paramilitary groups infiltrating from above, and now some secret protocol he'd never heard of. It was almost too much to process. "I don't understand," he said, turning to his father. "Who are these people? What's Protocol Zeta?" Doug sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's complicated, son. The Silence Group. They're a sort of watchdog organization. Officially, they don't exist. Unofficially, they're tasked with keeping tabs on places like this, making sure we don't step out of line, and Protocol Zeta." A ghost of a smile flickered across Doug's face. "Let's just say it's our insurance policy. A way to make sure that if things go sideways, the truth doesn't get buried along with us." Before Trent could ask for clarification, another tremor rocked the facility. This one was stronger than before, accompanied by the shriek of tearing metal. "Breach on Level 3, someone shouted. They're in the main corridor." Doug's expression hardened. "This is it, people. First contact. Remember your training, stick to the protocols, and above all else, stay alive. We may be the only thing standing between Earth and total annihilation." As if to punctuate his words, the lights flickered and died, plunging the Nexus into darkness. For a heart-stopping moment, there was only silence. Then, slowly, the emergency generators kicked in, bathing the room in an eerie red glow. And in that crimson half-light, Trent saw something move at the edge of his vision, something that didn't belong, that shouldn't exist in any sane, rational world. The breach was complete. The aliens had arrived, and humanity's fight for survival was about to begin. Chapter 7. Event Horizon. The world seemed to tilt on its axis as the first wave of alien entities poured through the rift. The Nexus, once a bastion of cutting-edge science and order, devolved into chaos in a matter of seconds. Alarms blared, emergency lights strobed, and the air crackled with an otherworldly energy that set every hair on end. Doug's voice cut through the pandemonium, steady and authoritative. "Initiate full evacuation protocols. All non-essential personnel to the secure bunkers immediately." As the room erupted into frenzied activity, Trent found himself frozen in place. his eyes locked on the nightmarish forms emerging from the rift. They defied easy description. A writhing mass of tentacles and gleaming carapaces, pulsing with an inner light that hurt to look at directly. Trent. Doug's shout snapped him back to reality. "We need to move now." Trent nodded, his throat too dry for words. He followed his father towards the main exit, but a violent tremor shook the facility, sending both of them stumbling. The reinforced doors of the Nexus groaned, buckling under some immense pressure from the other side. "This way," Doug said, grabbing Trent's arm and pulling him towards a concealed panel in the wall. With a swift series of keystrokes on a hidden pad, the panel slid open, revealing a narrow emergency corridor. The transport tubes are our best shot at getting to the surface. As they rushed down the dimly lit passage, the sounds of battle erupted behind them. Gunfire, inhuman shrieks, and the sickening crunch of metal being torn apart echoed through the facility. "What about the others?" Trent asked, his voice hoarse. "Albert, Dr. Chen, they know the protocols," Doug said grimly. "We'll rendezvous at the safe point topside. Right now, our priority is survival." They reached a junction where the corridor split into 3 directions. Doug hesitated for a moment, then pointed to the right. "This way leads to—" His words were cut off by an ear-splitting screech. From the left passage, a nightmarish form lunged at them, all glistening black chitin and razor-sharp appendages. Doug shoved Trent aside and raised his arm. For the first time, Trent noticed the sleek, alien-looking device strapped to his father's wrist. A pulse of blue energy erupted from the device, catching the creature mid-leap. It writhed in agony, its form seeming to fold in on itself before collapsing into a smouldering heap. "Dad," Trent breathed, eyes wide. "What the hell was that?" Doug helped him to his feet, his expression grim. "Reverse-engineered from the Roswell tech. Come on, we can't stay here." They pressed on, the facility shuddering around them. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut in their wake, a futile attempt to contain the spreading invasion. Through gaps in the walls, Trent caught glimpses of the horror unfolding throughout Area 51. Scientists and security personnel fought desperate, losing battles against waves of alien monstrosities. In one lab, he saw a group of researchers barricaded behind a shimmering energy field, their faces masks of terror as tentacles probed for weaknesses in their defense. "Almost there," Doug panted, as they approached a sealed door marked Transport Hub. He placed his hand on a biometric scanner, and the door hissed open. The cavernous chamber beyond housed a series of sleek, tube-like vehicles, clearly of non-terrestrial origin. Doug ushered Trent towards the nearest one, his fingers flying over a control panel. "These will take us to the surface bunker," he explained. "From there, we can." A deafening explosion rocked the chamber. Trent spun around to see the entrance they'd just come through, erupting in a shower of debris and alien forms. Leading the charge was a being unlike any they'd encountered so far, taller, more humanoid, its body crackling with barely contained energy. "Go!" Doug shouted, shoving Trent into the open transport pod. "I'll hold them off." "Dad, no." Trent reached out, but the pod's door was already sealing shut. Through the transparent material, he watched in horror as his father turned to face the oncoming horde. Doug raised both arms, the devices on his wrists humming to life. Bolts of energy lashed out, carving swaths through the alien ranks. But for every creature that fell, 2 more took its place. The lead entity strode forward, unaffected by the barrage, its featureless face focused solely on Doug. Trent pounded on the pod's interior, screaming for his father. But his voice was lost in the roar of the transport system powering up. The last thing he saw before the pod shot into the tunnel was Doug, standing defiantly as the alien leader reached for him with elongated, glowing fingers. Then darkness engulfed him, and Trent felt the sickening lurch of rapid acceleration. The journey lasted only moments, but to Trent it felt like an eternity. His mind raced, replaying the image of his father facing down the alien horde. When the pod finally slowed and the door hissed open, Trent stumbled out, disoriented and nauseous. He found himself in another large chamber, this one a hive of activity. Military personnel rushed about, barking orders and prepping equipment. Scientists huddled over banks of computers, their faces pale and drawn. And there, coordinating it all, was a face Trent recognized from countless news broadcasts and military briefings. "General Landry," he breathed. The grizzled officer turned, his steely gaze locking onto Trent. "Clark's boy," he growled. "Where's your father?" Trent opened his mouth, but no words came out. The reality of what he'd just witnessed came crashing down on him, and he felt his knees go weak. A hand gripped his shoulder, steadying him. "Easy there, kid," a familiar voice said. Trent looked up to see Albert, his wild hair singed and his lab coat torn, but very much alive. "Albert," Trent gasped. "My dad. He's still down there. We have to go back for him." Albert exchanged a look with General Landry. "Trent," he said gently, "we can't. The lower levels are completely overrun. If Doug's still alive, he'll find a way to contact us." "And if he's not?" Trent demanded, anger flaring through his grief. "Then we honor his sacrifice by finishing what he started," Landry said firmly. "Your father knew the risks, son. We all did. Now we need to focus on containing this threat before it spreads beyond Area 51. As if to punctuate his words, a distant explosion rattled the chamber. Dust rained down from the ceiling, and the lights flickered ominously. "Status report," Landry barked. A young officer rushed up, her face pale. "Sir, the aliens have breached the upper levels. Our perimeter defenses are failing, and we've lost contact with the NSA watchpost in Rachel." Trent's blood ran cold. Rachel, the tiny town where all of this had started, where his grandmother's stories had led him. And now it was in the path of an alien invasion. "What are our options, General?" Albert asked, his usual jovial tone replaced by grim determination. Landry's face was a mask of stone. "We have contingencies for this scenario. None of them are pretty." He turned to address the room at large. "Listen up, people. We are now at DEFCON 1. Our priority is containment. If we can't hold them here, we'll have to initiate the Scorched Earth Protocol." A murmur of shock ran through the assembled personnel. Trent looked to Albert for explanation, but the scientist's ashen face told him all he needed to know. Whatever the Scorched Earth Protocol was, it was a last resort, one that would likely result in the destruction of Area 51 and everything in it, including, potentially, his father. Trent straightened, a new resolve hardening within him. "General," he said, his voice steadier than he felt, "I want to help. My dad's been preparing me for this my whole life, even if I didn't know it. Put me to work." Landry studied him for a long moment, then nodded curtly. "All right, son, but understand this. From here on out, there's no going back. The world as we knew it ended the moment that Rift opened. We're in uncharted territory now." "Event horizon," Albert murmured. "What?" Trent asked. "In astrophysics, it's the boundary around a black hole beyond which nothing can escape," Albert explained. "We've crossed our own event horizon, Trent. The only way out is through." Another tremor shook the facility, more violent than before. Klaxons blared, and emergency lights bathed the room in a hellish red glow. "To your stations," Landry roared. "This is not a drill, people. The fate of humanity rests in our hands." As the room erupted into controlled chaos, Trent took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. His father was out there somewhere, fighting against impossible odds. The least Trent could do was honor that courage by facing the coming storm head-on. The event horizon had been crossed. There was no going back, only the long, perilous journey into an uncertain future, one where the very survival of the human race hung in the balance. And somewhere in the depths of Area 51, amidst the swirling maelstrom of an alien invasion, the rift pulsed and grew. The gateway between worlds yawned ever wider, promising either salvation or annihilation. The choice, as always, would be humanity's to make. Chapter 8. Darkness Falls. The emergency lights flickered ominously as Trent followed General Landry through the winding corridors of Area 51's upper levels. The facility's lockdown protocols had transformed the once familiar hallways into a claustrophobic maze of sealed bulkheads and security checkpoints. "Stay close," Landry growled, his weathered face illuminated by the red glow of emergency beacons. "We're heading to the command center. If there's any hope of coordinating a counter-offensive, it'll be from there." Trent nodded, trying to ignore the distant sounds of combat echoing through the facility. His mind kept drifting back to his father, last seen facing down an alien horde. The image of Doug's determined face as the transport pod doors closed haunted Trent's every step. They rounded a corner and came face to face with a group of armed soldiers, their weapons trained on the new arrivals. Trent's heart leaped into his throat, but Landry stepped forward, unfazed. "Stand down," he barked. Authorization code, Zulu Tango 93 Alpha. The soldiers lowered their weapons, visibly relieved. "General," the squad leader said, snapping to attention, "we've lost contact with most of the lower levels. Comms are spotty at best." Landry's jaw tightened. "What's the situation topside?" "Not good, sir. We've got reports of something breaching the perimeter fences, and there are civilian sightings pouring in from Rachel and the surrounding areas." Trent's blood ran cold. The invasion wasn't contained. It was spreading. As they continued towards the command center, Trent couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The shadows seemed to move in unnatural ways, and more than once he could have sworn he saw something skitter just at the edge of his vision. They entered a large room filled with banks of computers and holographic displays. Scientists and military personnel worked feverishly, their faces drawn with exhaustion and fear. Albert was there, hunched over a console, his wild hair even more disheveled than usual. "Albert," Trent called out, relief washing over him at the sight of a familiar face. The scientist looked up, a wan smile crossing his features. "Trent, my boy, glad to see you made it." His expression sobered as he turned to Landry. "General, we've got a problem. A big one." Landry strode over, Trent close behind. "What is it?" Albert pulled up a holographic display of the facility. Red areas pulsed ominously, spreading like a virus through the schematic. "The aliens aren't just invading, they're changing the environment. Look at these readings." Trent leaned in, his scientific curiosity momentarily overriding his fear. The data scrolling across the screen showed massive shifts in atmospheric composition, gravitational anomalies, and energy signatures unlike anything he'd ever seen. "It's as if they're terraforming the facility," Trent murmured, "adapting it to their own biology." Albert nodded grimly. "Precisely. And it's not just the environment that's changing." He tapped a few keys, bringing up security camera footage. The images made Trent's stomach lurch. They showed personnel, scientists, soldiers, technicians, moving through the corridors with jerky, unnatural motions. Their eyes glowed with an eerie light, and in some cases their very flesh seemed to be shifting. "Are they infected?" Trent asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "We don't know," Albert replied, "but whatever's happening to them, it's spreading fast. We've had to quarantine entire sections of the facility." Landry's face was a mask of stone. "How long before the changes reach this level?" Albert shook his head. "Hours, maybe less. We're working on a way to counter the effects, but without more data." He trailed off, his eyes locking onto something behind Trent and Landry. "Oh God!" Trent spun around. Through the reinforced windows of the command center, he saw a figure shambling towards them. It was Dr. Chen, but not as he remembered her. Her skin had taken on a sickly translucent quality, and her movements were puppet-like, as if controlled by unseen strings. "Lisa," Albert breathed, taking a step towards the window. "Don't," Landry snapped, pulling him back. "We don't know what she's capable of in that state." Dr. Chen's head snapped towards them, her once kind eyes now glowing with an alien intelligence. When she spoke, her voice was a discordant chorus of human and inhuman tones. "The convergence is at hand," she intoned. "Resistance is evolution." Before anyone could react, she pressed her hand against the reinforced glass. To Trent's horror, the material began to ripple and distort, as if turning to liquid beneath her touch. "Seal the room," Landry roared. "Initiate quarantine protocols." Blast shields slammed down over the windows as klaxons blared. Trent caught one last glimpse of Dr. Chen's twisted form before darkness fell. In the chaos that followed, Trent found himself pulled aside by Albert. The older scientist's eyes were wide with a mix of fear and excitement. "Trent," he whispered urgently, "there's something you need to see, something your father was working on before all this started." He led Trent to a secluded corner of the command center, away from the frantic activity. With trembling hands, Albert produced a small device, a data drive of some kind, but unlike any Trent had ever seen. "Doug gave this to me right before the breach," Albert explained. "Said if anything happened to him, I was to make sure you got it." He pressed the device into Trent's hand. "Whatever's on here, he thought it was important enough to risk everything for." Trent stared at the device, 1,000 questions racing through his mind. What secrets had his father uncovered? And why entrust them to him now, in the middle of an alien invasion? Before he could voice any of these thoughts, the room plunged into darkness. The emergency generators, which had been struggling to keep up with the facility's power demands, had finally given out. In the pitch black, Trent heard Landry's voice, steady despite the circumstances. "Stay calm, people. We've trained for this." But as Trent clutched his father's mysterious device, he couldn't shake the feeling that no amount of training could have prepared them for what was coming. The darkness that had fallen over Area 51 was more than just a power outage. It was the shadow of a cosmic threat, looming over not just the facility but potentially the entire world. And somewhere in that darkness, alien eyes watched and waited, their inhuman patience a stark contrast to the frantic beating of Trent's heart. The true test of humanity's resilience was about to begin. Chapter 9. The hive, the emergency lights cast an eerie red glow over the makeshift command center as Trent huddled with Albert, General Landry, and a handful of surviving scientists and military personnel. The air was thick with tension and the acrid smell of ozone, a lingering reminder of the alien technology that now permeated the facility. "Report!" Landry barked, his steely gaze fixed on a young lieutenant who had just burst into the room, breathless and wide-eyed. The soldier snapped to attention, though Trent could see a tremor in his hands. "Sir, we've detected a massive energy signature in Sector 7. It's like nothing we've ever seen before." Albert leaned forward, his wild hair more disheveled than ever. "Sector 7. But that's where we house the quantum containment units. The energy required to breach those would be astronomical," Trent finished, a chill running down his spine. "What exactly did you see down there, Lieutenant?" The young man swallowed hard. "It's transforming, sir. The walls, the floor, everything's covered in some kind of organic growth. And at the center, there's a structure, like a hive." A heavy silence fell over the room as the implications sank in. Trent's mind raced, piecing together fragments of information from his father's research.
"They're not just invading," he said slowly.
"They're colonizing." Landry's jaw tightened. "Then we need to stop them. Now, before they can establish a foothold." He turned to the assembled group. "I want a strike team ready in 5 minutes. We're going in." As the room erupted into activity, Trent felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to see Albert, the older scientist's eyes filled with a mix of fear and determination. "Trent, my boy, I think it's time we took a look at what's on that drive your father left you," Albert said quietly. "If Doug suspected something like this might happen." Trent nodded, fishing the alien device from his pocket. Its smooth, iridescent surface seemed to pulse with an inner light. "How do we even access it?" he wondered aloud. Albert grinned, a flash of his old enthusiasm breaking through the grim atmosphere. "Leave that to me. Your father and I. Well, let's just say we've had some practice with extraterrestrial tech." As Albert set to work interfacing the device with their systems, Trent joined Landry and the strike team for their final briefing. The general's face was a mask of grim determination as he outlined their plan of attack. "Our primary objective is to neutralize the hive structure," Landry explained, gesturing to a holographic map of Sector 7. "We'll be using experimental weapons reverse-engineered from alien tech. They pack a punch, but they're unstable. Use them only as a last resort." Trent studied the unfamiliar weapons being distributed to the team. They looked like a cross between conventional firearms and something out of a sci-fi movie, with pulsing energy cores and sleek organic curves. "What about survivors?" Trent asked. "There could still be uninfected personnel down there." Landry's expression softened slightly. "Rescue, if possible, but the mission comes first. We can't risk the hive spreading further." He paused, fixing Trent with a penetrating stare. "You sure you're up for this, son? No one would blame you for sitting this one out." Trent squared his shoulders. "My father's still out there somewhere. If there's any chance of finding him, I need to be part of this." The general nodded, a hint of respect in his eyes. "All right then, gear up." As the team made final preparations, a shout from Albert drew everyone's attention. The scientist was staring at a holographic display, his face pale. "My God," he whispered. "Doug, what did you discover?" Trent rushed over, his heart pounding. The display showed a series of complex equations and diagrams, along with what looked like a message. As he read it, Trent felt the ground shift beneath his feet, metaphorically and literally, as another tremor shook the facility. "The rift," Trent breathed. "It wasn't an accident. It was created intentionally." Albert nodded, his voice hushed with awe and horror. "By a race calling themselves the Observers. They've been watching us, studying us, for millennia. The rift was their way of testing us." "Testing us for what?" Landry demanded, striding over. Before Albert could answer, alarms blared throughout the command center. A technician's panicked voice cut through the chaos. "Multiple breaches detected. The hive is expanding rapidly." Landry's face hardened. "We're out of time. Move out now." As the strike team rushed towards Sector 7, Trent's mind reeled with the implications of his father's discovery. The Observers, the rift, the invasion, it was all part of some vast cosmic experiment. But to what end? The corridors leading to Sector 7 were a nightmare of twisted metal and pulsing organic growth. The air grew thicker, filled with spores that glowed faintly in the emergency lighting. Trent's breath fogged inside his protective mask as they pushed deeper into the transformed section of the facility. And then they saw it. The hive. It rose from the center of what had once been a state-of-the-art research lab, a massive structure of intertwined tendrils and pulsing membranous sacs. At its base, Trent could see figures moving, some human, some decidedly not. "Dear God," someone whispered. "What are they doing?" Trent squinted, trying to make sense of the scene before them. The human figures seemed to be offering themselves to the alien structure. As he watched in horror, one of them was enveloped by a tendril, drawn into the hive's pulsing mass. "It's not just colonization," Trent realized aloud. "It's transformation. There, evolving." Landry raised his weapon. "Then we end this now. All units, open fire." The air filled with the high-pitched whine of alien weaponry as the strike team unleashed a barrage of energy blasts. The hive structure quivered and recoiled, releasing an unearthly shriek that seemed to penetrate Trent's very bones. But for every tendril they severed, 2 more grew in its place. And now the transformed humans were fighting back, their movements unnaturally fast and precise. "Fall back!" Landry shouted as a wave of hostiles surged towards them. "Bottleneck them in the corridor!" As they retreated, Trent caught a glimpse of something that made his blood run cold. Among the advancing horde was a familiar face, Dr. Chen, her form now a horrifying fusion of human and alien. And in her distorted features, Trent saw not mindless aggression, but cold, calculating intelligence. They were being herded, he realized. This wasn't just a mindless assault, it was a coordinated attack. General Trent called out, "This isn't working, we need to." His words were cut off as the floor beneath them suddenly gave way. Trent felt a moment of weightlessness, then the sickening lurch of freefall. He tumbled through darkness, the sounds of battle fading above him. When he came to, he found himself in a dimly lit chamber, separated from the rest of the team. The air was thick with glowing spores, and all around him he could hear the soft, wet sounds of organic matter shifting and growing. And then from the shadows, a figure emerged. Trent's breath caught in his throat as he recognized the face of his father, Doug Clark. But there was something wrong, something alien in his eyes and the way he moved. "Dad," Trent whispered, his voice trembling. Doug's mouth curved into a smile that was not quite human. When he spoke, his voice was a dissonant blend of familiar and utterly alien. "Hello, son," the thing wearing his father's face said. "We've been waiting for you. It's time you learned the truth about the observers, and your place in their grand design." As the transformed Doug advanced, Trent felt a surge of conflicting emotions, fear, hope, and a dawning realization that the fate of humanity might rest on what happened next in this alien heart of Area 51. The hive pulsed around them, a living reminder that the rules of reality had changed, and in this new world the line between human and alien, friend and foe, was blurring with every passing moment. Chapter 10. Fractured Earth. The first reports trickled in slowly, dismissed as hoaxes or mass hysteria. Blurry video footage of strange lights over the Nevada desert, eyewitness accounts of bizarre creatures stalking the outskirts of Rachel, panicked calls about people disappearing into thin air, but as the hours ticked by, the trickle became a flood. In newsrooms across the globe, editors scrambled to make sense of the deluge of information pouring in from the American Southwest. CNN was the first major network to break the story, their breathless anchor struggling to maintain composure as she delivered the news that would change the world forever. "We're receiving reports of what appears to be, and I can hardly believe I'm saying this, an extraterrestrial incursion centered around the facility known as Area 51 in Nevada." The reaction was immediate and intense. Social media exploded with a mix of fear, excitement, and disbelief. Alien invasion and Area 51 trended worldwide within minutes. Governments issued hasty statements urging calm while frantically trying to gather more information. In the Oval Office, the President of the United States sat ashen-faced as his national security advisor delivered a grim briefing. "Mr. President, we've lost all contact with Area 51 and the surrounding military installations. Satellite imagery shows." "Well, sir, it shows something we can't explain. A sort of energy field expanding outward from the facility." The President's voice was barely above a whisper. "My God, how do we stop it?" "We're not sure we can, sir, but we're mobilizing everything we've got." As military convoys rolled towards Nevada and fighter jets screamed across the sky, a different kind of army was mobilizing in the shadows. In nondescript offices and hidden bunkers around the world, operatives of the Silence Group sprang into action. Their mission: control the narrative, suppress the truth, maintain order at any cost. In a sleek, high-tech command center buried deep beneath Washington, D.C., the director of the Silence Group barked orders to her team. "I want every scrap of footage scrubbed from the internet. Feed the media our cover story about a chemical leak and mass hallucinations. And someone get me a direct line to our assets in Rachel. We need to contain this before it spreads any further." But even as the Silence Group worked tirelessly to stem the tide of information, the truth was slipping through their fingers like sand. In Rachel, Nevada, Jenny Hawkins huddled with old Bill and a group of locals in the basement of the Little Alley Inn. The sounds of chaos echoed from above, shattering glass, screaming engines, and something else, something inhuman. "We should never have dug into this," Bill muttered, his weathered face pale in the dim light of their makeshift shelter. "Some secrets are meant to stay buried." Jenny shook her head, clutching her grandmother's journal to her chest. "No, Bill, this is exactly why we needed to know, so we could be prepared." A thunderous crash from upstairs made everyone flinch. Pat, the diner's owner, hefted a shotgun with grim determination. "Prepared or not, looks like the fight's coming to us." As if in response to her words, a piercing shriek cut through the air, followed by the sound of tearing metal. Something was trying to get in. Jenny's mind raced, piecing together fragments of her grandmother's stories with the terrifying reality unfolding around them. "The journal," she said suddenly. "It mentions a hidden bunker, something the government built decades ago in case of this." Bill's eyes widened with recognition. "The old missile silo, but that's been abandoned for years." "Maybe not as abandoned as we thought," Jenny replied. "It might be our only chance." As the group debated their options, Jenny's phone buzzed with an incoming message. She glanced at the screen and felt her heart skip a beat. It was from an unknown number, but the content made her blood run cold. "Clark legacy in danger. Confluence imminent. Find the key." Before she could process the cryptic warning, the basement door exploded inward in a shower of splinters. Silhouetted in the doorway was a figure that defied description, a writhing mass of tentacles and glowing eyes, vaguely humanoid but unmistakably alien. "Run!" Pat screamed, raising her shotgun. The world dissolved into chaos as Jenny and the others fled through a hidden back exit, the sounds of combat fading behind them. As they raced through the darkened streets of Rachel, Jenny couldn't shake the feeling that they were running towards something as much as they were running away. The key, the Clark legacy, the confluence, pieces of a cosmic puzzle that she was only beginning to understand. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away in the heart of New York City, Dr. Elizabeth Reyes, a renowned astrophysicist and secret consultant for the Silence Group, stared at her computer screen in disbelief. The data streaming in from observatories around the world painted a picture that defied conventional understanding. "It's not just Area 51, she murmured to herself. "The entire fabric of space-time is fracturing." Her fingers flew across the keyboard, correlating the anomalous readings with historical data. A pattern emerged, one that sent a chill down her spine. The Roswell incident, the Philadelphia experiment, the Tunguska event, all connected, all leading to this moment. A soft chime from her secure line jolted her from her reverie. The voice on the other end was distorted, but the urgency was clear. "Dr. Reyes, we need your analysis. Is this an invasion or something else?" Elizabeth took a deep breath, weighing her words carefully. "Sir, based on the data I'm seeing, this isn't just an invasion, it's a convergence. Our universe is colliding with another, and Area 51 is ground zero." There was a long pause on the other end. When the voice spoke again, it was barely above a whisper. "God help us all." As the call ended, Elizabeth turned back to her screens, a mix of fear and scientific curiosity warring within her. The boundaries between dimensions were crumbling, and with them, everything humanity thought they knew about the universe. In orbit high above the Earth, astronauts aboard the International Space Station watched in awe and terror as the planet below them began to change. Swirling patterns of energy danced across the atmosphere, concentrating over the American Southwest but spreading rapidly. Commander Sarah Chen, her face illuminated by the ethereal glow, keyed her radio with a shaking hand. "Houston, are you seeing this?" Only static answered her. The ISS had never felt so alone, a tiny island of humanity adrift in a sea of cosmic chaos. As governments scrambled to respond and civilians alternated between panic and fascination, A select few individuals around the world felt a strange resonance. People with unique abilities or inexplicable experiences in their past suddenly found themselves drawn towards Nevada, as if called by some unseen force. In a small apartment in Tokyo, a young woman named Yuki Tanaka jolted awake from a vivid dream, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. In a Rio de Janeiro favela, a street artist named Carlos stepped back from his latest mural, realizing with a start that he had painted a perfect depiction of the Area 51 rift. The Earth itself seemed to tremble, fault lines shifting and volcanoes stirring to life. It was as if the planet was preparing for a transformation, a metamorphosis on a scale never before seen. And at the heart of it all, in the depths of Area 51, Trent Clark faced the thing that had once been his father. The fate of two universes hung in the balance, with humanity caught in the crossfire. The invasion had begun, but it was only the first act in a cosmic drama millennia in the making. As the boundaries between worlds crumbled, one question echoed across the fractured Earth. Would humanity survive the confluence, or be swept away in the tides of cosmic change? Chapter 11, Blood and Sand. The old Jeep bounced violently as it sped across the rugged desert terrain, its suspension groaning in protest. Jenny Hawkins gripped the dashboard, her knuckles white, as old Bill navigated the treacherous landscape. In the rearview mirror, the night sky above Rachel glowed an unnatural, pulsing red. "We can't outrun them forever," Pat shouted from the back seat, her shotgun clutched tightly to her chest. "Where the hell are we going, Bill?" The old man's weathered face was a mask of determination. "The missile silo Jenny mentioned. If it's still there, it might be our only chance." Jenny's mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of information swirling in her head. Her grandmother's stories, the cryptic message on her phone, the terrifying reality of the alien invasion. It was all connected, she was sure of it. But how? A high-pitched whine cut through the air, growing louder by the second. Bill swore, swerving sharply to avoid a beam of searing light that struck the ground where they had been moments before. "They're on to us!" Pat yelled, leaning out the window to fire a wild shot at their pursuer. Jenny twisted in her seat, her breath catching in her throat as she caught sight of their attacker. It was like nothing she had ever seen, a sleek, otherworldly craft that seemed to shimmer in and out of existence as it gave chase. "Bill," Jenny said, her voice tight with urgency, "I think I know where we need to go." "My grandmother's journal, it mentioned a place called Shadow Point, said it was some kind of backup facility." Bill's eyes widened in recognition. "Shadow Point? I always thought that was just a local legend. You sure about this?" Another energy beam sizzled past them, close enough that Jenny could feel the heat on her face. "I'm sure we don't have any other options." With a grunt of acknowledgement, Bill wrenched the steering wheel, sending the Jeep careening down a nearly invisible path between two towering mesas. The alien craft screamed overhead, momentarily losing sight of its prey. As they plunged deeper into the labyrinthine canyons, Jenny pulled out her grandmother's journal, flipping frantically through its worn pages. Sarah Clark's neat handwriting filled the margins with cryptic notes and diagrams. "There!" Jenny exclaimed, pointing to a hand-drawn map. "Shadow Point is supposed to be hidden in a cave system about 10 miles north of here." Bill nodded grimly. "I know the area. Treacherous terrain, though. We'll have to ditch the Jeep soon and go on foot." The next hour was a blur of heart-pounding chases and narrow escapes. They abandoned the Jeep at the base of a sheer cliff, scrambling up a nearly invisible trail as the sounds of alien searchers echoed through the canyons below. As they crested the ridge, breathless and battered, Jenny gasped at the sight before them. The desert stretched out like a moonlit sea, and in the distance, a faint shimmer in the air betrayed the presence of Area 51. Even from this far away, she could see flashes of otherworldly light and strange, twisting shapes rising from the facility. "My God," Pat whispered. "It's really happening, isn't it? The end of the world." Jenny shook her head, a fierce determination burning in her eyes. No, not if we can help it. They pressed on through the night, following the convoluted directions in Sarah's journal. With each step, Jenny felt a growing sense of something, a pull, a resonance, as if every cell in her body was attuned to some unseen frequency. As dawn broke, painting the desert in hues of gold and crimson, they finally spotted it, a nearly invisible fissure in the base of a towering rock formation. "This is it," Jenny breathed, her hand trembling as she reached out to touch the rough stone. "Shadow Point." But before they could approach, a voice rang out, freezing them in their tracks. "That's far enough!" They spun to see a group of armed figures emerging from behind nearby boulders, their weapons trained on the exhausted travelers. Jenny's heart sank, thinking they had been caught by alien forces or government agents. But as the newcomers drew closer, she realized they were civilians just as scared and desperate as her own group. A tall, muscular woman with close-cropped hair stepped forward, her eyes narrowing as she studied Jenny. "You're Sarah Clark's granddaughter, aren't you? We've been waiting for you." Jenny blinked in surprise. You knew my grandmother," the woman nodded. "Name's Elaine. I served with Sarah back in the day before." Well, before a lot of things. She gestured to the hidden entrance. Shadow Point was her failsafe, a place to rally if the worst ever happened. As Elaine's group led them into the hidden facility, Jenny's mind reeled. The cool, recycled air of the underground complex was a shock after the desert heat. Banks of old computers hummed to life, screens flickering with data streams that made no sense to her. "Your grandmother was part of a secret program," Elaine explained as they walked, "studying the rift, preparing for the possibility of invasion. Most folks thought she was crazy, but Sarah, she knew. Somehow she always knew." They entered a large circular room dominated by a holographic display of the Earth. Red points of light pulsed across its surface, concentrating around Area 51 but spreading rapidly. "It's happening faster than we predicted," a bespectacled man muttered, his fingers flying over a keyboard. "The confluence is accelerating." Jenny stepped forward, drawn to the swirling lights. Confluence. What does that mean? Elaine's face was grim. It means the barriers between dimensions are breaking down. Our world is merging with something else. And Area 51 is the epicenter. A memory surfaced in Jenny's mind, her grandmother's voice soft and urgent as she tucked a young Jenny into bed. "Remember, sweetheart, if the sky ever turns wrong, if the world starts to change, you find Shadow Point. You find the key." "The key," Jenny whispered, her hand unconsciously reaching for the pendant she always wore, a gift from Sarah on her 18th birthday. "That's what the message meant. I'm the key, aren't I?" Elaine nodded slowly. "Sarah always said you were special, Jenny. That you had a connection to the other side." We never understood what she meant, but now. Before Jenny could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. The holographic display erupted in a cascade of red warnings. "We've got incoming!" someone shouted. Multiple bogies, moving fast. Elaine sprang into action, barking orders to her team. "Seal the blast doors! Activate the cloaking field!" As chaos erupted around her, Jenny found herself drawn to an alcove off the main room. There, bathed in soft blue light, stood a device unlike anything she had ever seen. It was a swirling mix of advanced technology and what looked like living tissue. Without thinking, she reached out to touch it. The moment her fingers made contact, a jolt of energy surged through her body. Images flashed before her eyes, the rift, the aliens, her father, and a face she had only seen in old photographs. Douglas Clark. He was alive, somewhere in the depths of Area 51, fighting a battle beyond human comprehension. As Jenny gasped and staggered back, she knew with bone-deep certainty what she had to do. The key to saving the world, to stopping the confluence, lay not in hiding, but in diving headlong into the heart of the storm. She turned to Elaine, her eyes blazing with newfound purpose. We need to get to Area 51. Now. Elaine studied her for a long moment, then nodded. I was afraid you'd say that. All right, people, she called out. Gear up, we're going into the belly of the beast. As the Shadow Point team prepared for what might be a suicide mission, Jenny clutched her grandmother's journal close. Whatever fate awaited them at Area 51, she knew one thing for certain. The confluence of blood and sand, of human and alien, of past and future, was about to reach its tipping point. And she, Jenny Hawkins, granddaughter of Sarah Clark, would be at the center of it all. Chapter 12, Ghosts in the Machine. Trent's heart pounded in his chest as he faced the thing wearing his father's face. The alien-Doug hybrid stood motionless, its unnaturally smooth features illuminated by the pulsing bioluminescence of the surrounding hive structure. Dad, Trent whispered, his voice cracking. Are you? Is there anything left of you in there? The creature tilted its head, an unsettlingly human gesture. When it spoke, Doug's familiar baritone was overlaid with an otherworldly resonance that sent chills down Trent's spine. More than you might think, son, it said. But also, so much more. The observers have given me clarity, understanding. I see now what needs to be done. Trent took a cautious step backward, his mind racing. The observers. You mean the aliens? What have they done to you? Improved me, Alien Doug replied, spreading his arms. The motion caused ripples of iridescent color to flow across his skin. As they will improve all of humanity if we let them. But first, there are truths you need to know. About our family's legacy, about Area 51's true purpose. Before Trent could respond, a distant explosion rocked the chamber. Dust and debris rained down from above, momentarily distracting the hybrid. In that instant, Trent's survival instincts kicked in. He bolted, ducking under a pulsating tendril and sprinting towards a half-hidden corridor he'd spotted earlier. "Trent, wait!" Alien Doug called out, but Trent didn't look back. He ran, his breath coming in ragged gasps, deeper into the twisted labyrinth that Area 51 had become. After what felt like hours, but was likely only minutes, Trent found himself in a dimly lit server room. Banks of computers lined the walls, their status lights blinking erratically. As he caught his breath, he noticed something odd. Despite the chaos engulfing the facility, these systems seemed to be functioning. Curiosity overrode caution, and Trent approached the nearest terminal. To his surprise, it responded to his touch, the screen flickering to life. A login prompt appeared, requesting credentials he didn't have. "Come on, think," Trent muttered to himself. What would his father use as a password? Then it hit him. The date of his mother's death, the day that had changed everything for their family. With trembling fingers he entered the numbers. The screen flashed, and suddenly Trent was staring at a treasure trove of classified files. His eyes widened as he scrolled through folder after folder of information on alien encounters dating back decades before Roswell. "Oh my God," he breathed. "They've known all along." As Trent delved deeper into the files, a coherent picture began to emerge. The government hadn't just been studying alien technology, they'd been actively preparing for an invasion. Project Blackbird, Operation Looking Glass, MJ-12, code names and classified operations that painted a picture of a shadow war fought in secret for generations. A file labeled Sentinel Protocol caught his eye. As he opened it, Trent felt the blood drain from his face. It was a contingency plan, detailing the steps to be taken in case of a full-scale alien incursion. The final step, marked in bold red letters, chilled him to the core: Scorched Earth Initiative. They were going to sacrifice the entire Southwest, Trent realized aloud. Millions of people, just to stop the invasion. Not sacrifice, Trent. Save. Trent spun around to see his father, the real Doug, battered and bloodied but unmistakably human, standing in the doorway. Relief flooded through Trent, quickly followed by confusion and suspicion. "Dad, But I just saw. How do I know it's really you? Doug's face softened, a sad smile playing at the corners of his mouth. The night your mother died, you asked me if she had become a star. I told you no, that stars were just balls of gas burning billions of miles away. It was the wrong thing to say, and I've regretted it ever since. Tears welled up in Trent's eyes. It was him. It was really him. He rushed forward, embracing his father tightly. I thought I'd lost you, Trent choked out. For a while there you did, Doug replied, his voice heavy with emotion. But I fought my way back. We don't have much time, son. We need to get to the deep underground research facility. It's our only chance of stopping this. As they made their way through the twisted corridors of Area 51, Doug explained what he'd learned. The alien presence that had taken his form was part of a vanguard, an advanced force sent to prepare Earth for assimilation. But there was a resistance movement among the aliens, one that believed humanity should be given a choice. The observers aren't united, Doug said as they descended a hidden elevator shaft. Some see us as nothing more than lab rats, others as potential allies. The outcome of this invasion could determine the fate of multiple dimensions. The elevator doors opened onto a vast chamber unlike anything Trent had ever seen. Impossibly advanced technology lined the walls, pulsing with barely contained energy. At the center stood a massive device that looked like a cross between a particle accelerator and a living organism. The Nexus, Doug breathed. The culmination of everything we've learned since Roswell. With this, we might be able to close the rift and push back the invasion. As they approached the Nexus, alarms began to blare. The chamber shook, and the air itself seemed to ripple with distortions. They're coming, Doug said grimly. Trent, I need you to listen carefully. If anything happens to me, you have to finish this. The fate of humanity depends on it. Trent nodded, steeling himself for whatever came next. As father and son worked feverishly to activate the Nexus, the sounds of battle drew ever closer. The ghosts of past encounters, of secrets kept and truths hidden, seemed to swirl around them, a silent chorus urging them on. In that moment, as the weight of generations of preparation and sacrifice pressed down upon them, Trent realized that this had always been his destiny. The Clark legacy wasn't just about uncovering the truth of alien life. It was about standing as the last line of defense between humanity and the unknown. As the Nexus hummed to life, its energy building to a crescendo, Trent exchanged a look with his father. Whatever came through that door, whatever cosmic forces they were about to unleash, they would face it together. The ghosts in the machine had stirred, awakening ancient technologies and long-buried truths, and as the chamber doors began to buckle under an otherworldly assault, Trent knew that the real battle for Earth's future was only just beginning. Chapter 13. Quantum Entanglement. The Nexus hummed with barely contained power, its crystalline structure pulsing with an otherworldly light. Trent watched in awe as his father's fingers danced across holographic controls, inputting a series of complex equations. "What exactly is this thing, Dad?" Trent asked, his voice hushed with a mixture of reverence and fear. Doug's eyes never left the controls as he answered. "It's a quantum entanglement device, son. The culmination of decades of research, including some groundbreaking work I did with Stephen Hawking years ago." Trent's eyebrows shot up. "You worked with Stephen Hawking? How come you never told me?" A wry smile played at the corners of Doug's mouth. "There's a lot I never told you, Trent. I'm sorry for that. But now you need to know everything." As Doug worked, his mind drifted back to those heady days of theoretical physics and boundless possibility. Cambridge University, 20 years earlier, Doug sat across from Stephen Hawking, watching in fascination as the renowned physicist's eyes darted across the equations projected on the screen before them. The computerized voice, so familiar now after months of collaboration, broke the silence. "Your calculations on multi-dimensional quantum entanglement are intriguing, Dr. Clark, but the energy requirements for such a device would be astronomical." Doug nodded, running a hand through his then dark hair. "I know, Stephen. But if we could find a way to harness the energy of a quantum vacuum fluctuation, we could potentially create a stable wormhole, Hawking's voice finished. Fascinating, and potentially catastrophic if mishandled. Doug's expression grew serious. That's why we need to pursue this, Stephen. If my theories about the observers are correct, we may need this technology sooner than anyone realizes. Hawking was silent for a long moment, his eyes the only indication of the rapid thoughts behind them. Finally, he spoke. Very well, Douglas, let us venture into the unknown together. But remember, we are playing with forces beyond our full comprehension. The consequences could be dire. A violent tremor shook the chamber, snapping Doug back to the present. Trent steadied himself against a console, his eyes wide with alarm. Dad, whatever you're going to do, I think you'd better do it fast. Doug nodded grimly, making a final adjustment to the nexus. Here goes nothing, he muttered, and pressed the activation sequence. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a sound like reality itself tearing, a beam of blinding energy erupted from the nexus. It lanced upward, puncturing through layers of rock and steel as if they were tissue paper, until it reached the rift hovering above Area 51. The effect was immediate and spectacular. The rift's swirling vortex of chaos began to contract, its wild energies being drawn into the nexus's beam. Trent watched in awe as the tear in space-time slowly began to close. "It's working!" he shouted over the deafening roar of energy. "Dad, you did it!" But Doug's face remained tense, his eyes fixed on the readouts scrolling across his screen. "It's not over yet," he called back. "The rift's fighting us. We need more power." As if in response to his words, the chamber shuddered violently. Cracks began to form in the walls, alien tendrils pushing through, seeking the source of the energy that threatened their invasion. "Trent," Doug shouted, "the auxiliary power couplings, we need to reroute them manually." Trent nodded, sprinting to a bank of controls on the far side of the room. As he worked to redirect the facility's remaining power to the Nexus, he couldn't help but marvel at the scope of what they were attempting. They were literally trying to sew up a hole in the universe. With a final surge of power, the Nexus's beam intensified. The rift contracted further, shrinking to a fraction of its former size. For a moment it seemed as if they had succeeded in closing it entirely. But then, just as victory seemed within reach, something went wrong. The Nexus began to spark and shake, smoke pouring from its base. The beam flickered and wavered, its grip on the rift weakening. "No, no, no!" Doug shouted, his fingers flying over the controls in a desperate attempt to stabilize the device. "We're losing coherence." Trent rushed back to his father's side, his heart pounding. "What's happening?" Doug's face was grim. "The entanglement is breaking down. We've closed most of the rift, but it's not enough. And now we've made things worse. Worse. How?" Before Doug could answer, a new alarm blared through the chamber. On the main screen, a diagram of the rift appeared, showing its reduced size. But around it, dozens of smaller rifts were beginning to form. "Oh, God," Trent breathed. "We fractured it." Doug nodded, his expression a mixture of defeat and determination. "Instead of one large tear, we now have multiple smaller ones. They're more stable individually, but together. Together they could cover an even larger area," Trent finished, the implications hitting him like a physical blow. The chamber shook again, more violently this time. The alien tendrils pushing through the cracks in the walls were growing larger, more insistent. "We need to get out of here," Doug said, grabbing Trent's arm. "This facility is compromised. Our only hope now is to reach the surface and coordinate with whatever forces are left." As they rushed towards the exit, Trent's mind reeled with questions. "Dad, what about the observers? The ones who aren't hostile? Can't they help us?" Doug's face was grim as they entered the emergency elevator. "That's our next move. But finding them won't be easy, and convincing them to intervene, that might be even harder." The elevator began its ascent, leaving behind the ruins of humanity's greatest scientific achievement. As they rose towards an uncertain future, Trent couldn't shake the feeling that they had just made a terrible situation even worse. The quantum entanglement that was supposed to save them had instead multiplied their problems. Now, with rifts opening across a wider area, the invasion would be harder than ever to contain. And somewhere out there, the observers were watching, waiting, judging whether humanity deserved to survive this crucible of cosmic proportions. As the elevator neared the surface, Doug placed a hand on Trent's shoulder. "Whatever happens next, son, I want you to know, I'm proud of you. And I'm sorry for all the secrets, all the lost time." Trent managed a weak smile. "We'll make it right, Dad, together." The elevator doors opened, revealing a world transformed. The sky above was a maelstrom of swirling energies, punctuated by the smaller rifts they had inadvertently created. In the distance, strange shapes moved on the horizon, alien forces advancing across the desert. As father and son stepped out to face this new reality, one thing was clear: the battle for Earth's future was far from over. It had only just begun. Chapter 14, Trojan Horse. The emergency bunker buzzed with tense activity as Doug and Trent joined the ragtag group of survivors. General Landry stood at a makeshift command center, barking orders into a crackling radio. Scientists huddled over jury-rigged equipment, their faces pale with exhaustion and fear. Armed personnel patrolled the perimeter, their eyes darting nervously to the sealed blast doors. As Doug briefed Landry on the Nexus's partial failure, Trent found himself drawn to a cluster of monitors displaying security feeds from throughout the facility. He watched, mesmerized, as alien forms twisted and writhed through the corridors they had so recently fled. "It's like they're searching for something," Trent murmured. A voice at his elbow made him jump. "Or someone." Trent turned to see Dr. Chen, her usual crisp lab coat replaced by a rumpled jumpsuit. Her eyes were bloodshot, her hair disheveled, but there was an intensity to her gaze that made Trent uneasy. "What do you mean?" he asked. Chen's lips curved in a thin smile. "Think about it. They're not just destroying indiscriminately. Their movements are purposeful, methodical. They're hunting." Before Trent could respond, a commotion erupted near the bunker's entrance. A small group of bedraggled survivors stumbled in, supported by a security team. Among them, Trent recognized the pale, drawn face of Helen, one of the junior researchers from his father's team. As medics rushed to attend to the newcomers, Trent noticed something odd about Helen's behavior. Her movements were jerky, almost mechanical, and her eyes seemed to focus on nothing and everything at once. Doug appeared at Trent's side, his expression grim. "We need to quarantine them immediately," he said in a low voice. "We can't risk—" His words were cut off by a blood-curdling scream. Helen had suddenly convulsed, her body contorting at impossible angles. As the horrified onlookers watched, her skin began to ripple and shift, taking on an otherworldly sheen. "Containment breach," Landry roared. "Security team, neutralize the threat." Chaos erupted in the bunker. Gunfire rang out, punctuated by inhuman shrieks. Trent found himself pulled to the ground by his father as a tentacle whipped through the air where his head had been moments before. "The infected," Doug gasped. "They're Trojan horses. The aliens are using them to infiltrate our safe zones." As the security team finally subdued the transformed Helen, a heavy silence fell over the bunker. The implications of what they had just witnessed sank in, and Trent could see the fear and suspicion blooming in the eyes of those around him. Landry's voice cut through the tension. "We need a way to identify the infected before they turn. Dr. Clark, tell me you have something." Doug shook his head, frustration evident in his voice. "We've been working on it, but without access to the main lab's equipment." "I might have an idea," Trent interrupted, his mind racing. All eyes turned to him, a mix of hope and skepticism on their faces. "Go on, son," Doug encouraged. Trent took a deep breath. "The alien technology, it operates on principles of quantum entanglement, right? What if the infection works the same way? a kind of biological quantum link between the host and the alien consciousness controlling it. He moved to one of the nearby consoles, fingers flying over the keyboard. If we could rig a scanner to detect quantum irregularities in a person's bioelectric field, we might be able to spot the infected before they turn. A murmur ran through the assembled group. Doug's eyes widened with realization. Of course, he breathed. Trent, that's brilliant. Dr. Chen, we'll need to repurpose some of the EM field generators, and I'll need someone to retrieve the quantum flux detector from Sector 3. As the scientists sprang into action, Landry pulled Doug and Trent aside. How long until this scanner of yours is operational? Doug glanced at Trent, a hint of pride in his eyes. A few hours if we're lucky, but General, you need to understand, this is all theoretical. We can't be certain it will work. Landry's jaw tightened. It's the best shot we've got. In the meantime, I want everyone in this bunker screened. Nobody goes anywhere alone, and at the first sign of unusual behavior, you sound the alarm. Understood. As the General moved away to organize the screening process, Trent couldn't help but notice the way people were looking at each other. Suspicion hung heavy in the air, friends and colleagues eyeing one another warily. The alien invasion had breached more than just the facility's physical defenses. It had infected the very trust that held their community together. Hours passed in a blur of feverish work and mounting tension. Trent found himself at the heart of the effort to construct the quantum scanner, his childhood tinkering with electronics finally put to world-saving use. But even as they made progress, the atmosphere in the bunker grew increasingly toxic. Accusations flew as people reported suspicious behavior in their colleagues. More than once, shouting matches broke out, threatening to descend into violence. Trent watched with a heavy heart as the stress and fear ate away at the group's cohesion. Finally, as Trent made the last connections on the prototype scanner, a hush fell over the bunker. Doug stepped forward, his face etched with fatigue, but his eyes bright with determination. "All right, people. This is it. We're going to test the scanner now. I know everyone's on edge, but I need you to remain calm. Remember, we're all in this together." As the first volunteer stepped up to be scanned, Trent held his breath. The device hummed to life, bathing the subject in a soft blue light. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a series of beeps, a readout appeared on the screen. "Clean," Doug announced, and a collective sigh of relief swept through the room. One by one, the bunker's occupants were scanned. With each negative result, the tension eased slightly, but Trent couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something. And then it happened. As Dr. Chen stepped up to the scanner, the device emitted a shrill alarm. The screen flashed red, displaying a chaotic swirl of quantum signatures. "Oh," Chen whispered, her eyes wide with horror. "That's impossible! I can't be!" Before anyone could react, Chen's body began to twist and change. But unlike Helen's violent transformation, this was subtle, controlled. In the space of a heartbeat, Chen's form shifted, becoming a perfect replica of General Landry. "Impressive device," the false Landry said, its voice a chilling mixture of human and alien tones. "But I'm afraid you're too late. We are already among you, have been from the start. Your world is ours now. It's only a matter of time." Chaos erupted once more as security personnel tried to subdue the shapeshifter. In the confusion, Trent saw several other people slipping away, their faces flickering between human and alien visages. As alarms blared and the sound of gunfire echoed through the bunker, Trent met his father's eyes. The truth hit them both at the same moment. The Trojan horse had worked. The aliens were inside their last bastion of defense, and the real battle for humanity's survival was only just beginning. Chapter 15. Eye of the Storm. The emergency lights cast a soft, pulsing glow over the makeshift command center. Trent sat slumped against a wall, his body aching from the frantic escape through Area 51's twisting corridors. Around him, the remaining survivors moved with quiet purpose, tending to the wounded and fortifying their temporary haven. They had managed to seal off a section of the underground complex, creating a buffer zone between themselves and the alien-infested areas of the facility. For the moment, at least, they had a chance to catch their breath. Doug approached, 2 steaming mugs in hand. He offered one to Trent, who accepted it gratefully. "It's not exactly gourmet coffee," Doug said with a wry smile, "but it's hot and caffeinated. Thought you could use it." Trent nodded, taking a sip. The bitter liquid was a far cry from his usual artisanal brews, but in that moment it tasted like heaven. "Thanks, Dad." Doug settled down next to his son, groaning softly as his battered body protested the movement. For a long moment they sat in silence, the weight of recent events hanging heavy between them. Finally Trent spoke. "Dad, I need to know. All those years, all those secrets. Why?" Doug sighed, his eyes fixed on some distant point. "I told myself it was to protect you, to give you a chance at a normal life. But the truth is, I was afraid of what knowing might do to you, afraid you'd end up like me, consumed by this cosmic chess game we've been playing for decades." He turned to face Trent, his expression a mixture of regret and pride. "But watching you these past few days, seeing how you've risen to this impossible challenge, I realize now that I underestimated you. You're stronger than I ever gave you credit for." Trent felt a lump form in his throat. "I learned from the best," he said softly. Doug chuckled, but there was a sadness in his eyes. "Your mother would be proud of you, you know. She always said you had her curiosity and my stubbornness. Quite the combination." "Tell me about her," Trent said, suddenly hungry for the family history he'd been denied for so long. "About how you met? About all of it." Doug nodded, settling back against the wall. "It was here, actually, at Area 51. Your mother was a brilliant xenobiologist, recruited straight out of grad school. I was already working on the Rift project, trying to make sense of the alien technology we'd recovered." As Doug spoke, painting a picture of 2 young scientists falling in love amid world-changing discoveries, Trent felt a bittersweet ache in his chest. This was the story he'd always wanted to hear, the missing pieces of his own history finally falling into place. "She was the one who first theorized that the rift might be artificial," Doug continued, "that it wasn't just a natural phenomenon, but something created by an intelligence far beyond our own. The observers." Trent leaned forward, his fatigue momentarily forgotten. "The observers, they're the ones behind all this, aren't they? The invasion, the infected, all of it." Doug nodded grimly. "We think so. But it's more complicated than that. From what we've pieced together, the observers aren't united. There are factions among them, some who see humanity as a threat to be eliminated, others who view us as potential allies, maybe even equals. And Mom, what happened to her?" A shadow passed over Doug's face. She got too close to the truth. Made a breakthrough that could have changed everything. But before she could fully test her theories, there was an accident. At least that's what we were told. Trent's blood ran cold. "You think she was? Murdered?" "I don't know," Doug admitted. "But after her death, I threw myself into the work, determined to finish what she started, to uncover the truth she died for. And in doing so, I neglected the most important thing she left behind." "You." Tears welled up in Trent's eyes. He reached out, gripping his father's hand. "I'm here now, Dad. We're in this together." Doug squeezed back, a sad smile on his face. "Together," he agreed. Their moment of connection was interrupted by the approach of General Landry. The grizzled soldier's face was a mask of grim determination. "Sorry to break up the family reunion," Landry said, "but we need to talk strategy. Our window of opportunity is closing fast." Doug nodded, rising to his feet. Trent followed suit, feeling a new sense of purpose coursing through him. "What's our status?" Doug asked as they moved to a makeshift war table. Landry gestured to a schematic of the facility. "We've managed to establish a secure perimeter around this section, but the alien presence is growing stronger by the hour. They're not just invading anymore. They're transforming the very structure of Area 51 to suit their needs. The hive, Trent murmured, remembering the nightmare of writhing tendrils and pulsing organic growth. Exactly, Landry confirmed. Our best chance is to strike now before they can fully entrench themselves. But we need a plan, something they won't see coming. Doug's brow furrowed in thought. The quantum scanner Trent developed, if we could modify it, boost its range, we might be able to use it offensively. Turn their own quantum entanglement against them. Trent's mind raced with possibilities, like a disruption field, something that could sever their connection to the hive mind. It's risky, Landry warned. We'd be operating on pure theory. And if it backfires? If it backfires, we're no worse off than we are now, Doug countered. I say we do it. As the three of them huddled over schematics and equations, hammering out the details of their desperate plan, Trent felt a strange mix of emotions wash over him. Fear, certainly the stakes couldn't be higher, but also a sense of belonging, of rightness. This was where he was meant to be, carrying on the legacy of both his parents, fighting for humanity's future. Hours passed in a blur of feverish preparation. The survivors rallied around the plan, each person finding their role in the coming battle. Weapons were distributed, equipment jury-rigged, and final goodbyes exchanged. The air thrummed with nervous energy, a palpable sense that they were on the cusp of something monumental. As the time for action drew near, Doug pulled Trent aside one last time. "Whatever happens out there," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I want you to know how proud I am of you. How proud your mother would be. You're the best of both of us, Trent. And if anyone can see this through, it's you." Trent swallowed hard, fighting back tears. "I love you, Dad." They embraced, a lifetime of missed moments and unspoken feelings poured into one crushing hug. Then, composing themselves, they turned to face the assembled team. Landry's voice rang out, steady and commanding. "All right, people, this is it. The fate of humanity rests on what we do in the next few hours. Remember your training, watch each other's backs, and no matter what happens, give 'em hell." A ragged cheer went up from the survivors. Trent felt a surge of determination course through him as he checked his equipment one last time. The eye of the storm was passing, and the true tempest lay ahead. As the blast doors slowly opened, revealing the alien warped corridors beyond, Trent exchanged one final look with his father. No words were needed. They were in this together, come what may. With a deep breath, Trent stepped forward into the unknown, ready to face whatever cosmic horrors awaited. The battle for Earth's future had begun in earnest, and he was prepared to see it through to the bitter end. Chapter 16, Prometheus Unbound. The reinforced doors of the Project Blackbird hangar loomed before them, their imposing bulk a testament to the secrets they concealed. Trent stood beside his father, both of them breathing heavily from their mad dash through alien-infested corridors. General Landry and a handful of survivors flanked them, weapons at the ready. "You're sure about this, Doug?" Landry asked, his voice low and tense. "If what's in there is half as dangerous as you've hinted." Doug nodded grimly. "We don't have a choice, General. What's in that hangar might be our only shot at turning the tide." With a deep breath, Doug placed his hand on the biometric scanner. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then, with a series of heavy clunks, the massive doors began to slide open. As they stepped into the cavernous space beyond, Trent felt his jaw drop. The hangar was easily the size of a football field, its high ceiling lost in shadows. But it wasn't the scale that took his breath away. It was what the hangar contained. Rows of sleek, otherworldly craft lined the floor, their hulls shimmering with an iridescent sheen that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Interspersed among them were pieces of equipment that Trent couldn't begin to comprehend, pulsing energy cores, crystalline structures that hummed with power, and devices that seemed to bend light itself around them. "My God," Landry breathed. "How long have we had all this?" "Since Roswell," Doug replied, already striding towards a central control station. "And before." But it's taken us decades to even begin to understand how it works, let alone replicate it. As Doug interfaced with the alien systems, holographic displays sprang to life around them. Trent watched in awe as schematics and data streams filled the air, painting a picture of technological marvels beyond human imagination. "What exactly are we looking for, Dad?" Trent asked, trying to make sense of the information swirling around them. Doug's fingers danced across the controls, his eyes darting from one display to another. Project Prometheus. It was our most ambitious attempt at reverse engineering the Observer's technology. A weapon that could there. A section of the floor began to retract, revealing a cylindrical device about the size of a car. It pulsed with an inner light, tendrils of energy crackling along its surface. "Is that safe?" one of the survivors asked nervously. Doug's expression was a mixture of excitement and trepidation. "Honestly, I'm not sure. We never got it fully operational. The power requirements were too extreme, and the risks." "We're way past worrying about risks," Landry cut in. "How do we turn it on?" As Doug explained the activation sequence, Trent found himself drawn to a nearby console. Something about the symbols on its display tugged at his memory, a pattern he'd seen before, in his father's notes. Without fully understanding why, Trent began to input a series of commands. The console hummed to life, and suddenly the cylindrical device began to rise from its housing, energy coursing through it with increasing intensity. "Trent, what did you do?" Doug called out, alarm evident in his voice. Before Trent could respond, the device emitted a pulse of energy that swept through the hangar. For a moment, Trent felt as if his entire being was coming apart at the seams, every atom of his body vibrating in sympathy with the alien technology. And then, as quickly as it began, it was over. The device settled into a steady hum, its glow now a soft, pulsing blue. It worked," Doug said, incredulity and pride warring in his voice. "Trent, how did you know?" His words were cut off by a deafening screech from outside the hangar. Through the still-open doors, they could see alien forms writhing in apparent agony, their bodies seeming to lose cohesion. "The quantum disruption field," Trent realized aloud. "It's working. Landry was already mobilizing the team. This is our chance. We need to push them back, reclaim as much of the facility as we can while they're vulnerable." As they prepared to move out, Doug pulled Trent aside. "Son, what you did, it shouldn't have been possible. The activation sequence, it was incomplete," Trent finished. "I know. But when I saw the symbols, it was like I could see the missing pieces, like I knew exactly what to do." Doug's face paled. "Your mother's research, the breakthrough she made before. Trent, I think you might have inherited more than just her curiosity." Before Trent could process the implications of his father's words, Landry's voice rang out. "Move out! And someone figure out how to make that thing mobile. It might be our only edge." The next hours passed in a blur of frantic action. With the Prometheus device leading the way, they pushed through the facility, driving back the alien forces. Trent found himself at the heart of the offensive, his newfound ability to interface with the alien tech proving invaluable. But as they reclaimed more ground, Trent began to notice something odd. The alien resistance was changing, adapting. It was subtle at first, a shift in tactics, a new resilience to the disruption field. But with each passing moment it became clearer they were learning, evolving in real time to counter the human offensive. "Dad," Trent called out during a lull in the fighting. "Something's wrong. The Prometheus device, it's not just affecting them. I think it's changing us too." Doug nodded grimly, holding up his hand. In the blue glow of the device, Trent could see faint lines of energy pulsing beneath his father's skin. "I've noticed, whatever this technology is, it's not just a weapon, it's a catalyst for change." As if in response to their realization, a new alarm began to blare throughout the facility. Landry's voice crackled over their comms, urgent and strained. "Clark, we've got a problem. The rift, it's expanding again. And this time, It's not just energy coming through. We've got incoming. Trent and Doug exchanged a look of mingled fear and determination. They had won a battle, but the war's far from over. And now, as they stood on the precipice of a new phase in the conflict, Trent couldn't shake the feeling that the very nature of that war and of humanity itself was about to change irrevocably. The Prometheus had been unbound, its fire gifted to humanity. But as with the mythical Titan's gift, the price of that power was yet to be fully realized. As they raced towards the expanding rift, Trent silently prayed that the cost wouldn't be too high. For him, for his father, or for the future of the human race. Chapter 17, The Majestic 12. As Trent and Doug rushed towards the expanding rift, alarms blaring all around them, a new complication arose. A heavily armed security team intercepted them, led by a stern-faced woman Trent didn't recognize. "Dr. Clark," she said, her voice cold and authoritative, "by order of the Majestic 12, you are to stand down immediately and surrender the Prometheus device." Doug's face hardened. "Damn it, Amanda. We don't have time for this. The rift is expanding and we need every advantage we've got." Trent looked between his father and the woman, confusion evident on his face. "Dad, what's going on? Who are the Majestic 12? Before Doug could answer, General Landry's voice crackled over the comms. "Clark, we've got a situation. Some kind of internal security forces trying to take control of the facility. They're claiming authority from something called Majestic 12. What the hell is going on?" The woman, Amanda, raised an eyebrow. "So much for operational security, Doctor. Clark, perhaps you'd like to explain to your son and the good general about the shadow government that's been running this facility for decades." Doug sighed, running a hand through his hair. "The Majestic 12 is a secret committee formed after Roswell. Top military brass, government officials, scientists. They oversee all alien-related research and operations. They're the ones who've been keeping this all under wraps." Trent's mind reeled. "And you're part of this committee?" "No," Doug said firmly. "I've worked with them, but I've never agreed with their methods or their secrecy. Which is why," he turned to Amanda, "I'm not handing over Prometheus. We need it to fight the invasion." Amanda's hand moved to her weapon. "That's not your decision to make, Doctor. The committee believes the alien technology is too dangerous in unsanctioned hands. We have protocols in place for this exact scenario." "Protocols?" Trent scoffed. "Look around you. Your protocols didn't prepare us for this. We're fighting for our survival here." "Exactly," Amanda replied coolly, "which is why we can't risk unstable elements like you running around with technology you don't fully understand. The Majestic 12 has contingencies in place, plans that have been decades in the making." As tensions rose, more security personnel filed into the corridor, effectively surrounding Doug's team. Trent could see the conflict in his father's eyes, the need to push forward against the invasion, warring with the desire to avoid bloodshed among their own people. Suddenly, a new voice joined the fray. Albert came wheezing around the corner, his wild hair even more dishevelled than usual. "Wait! Everyone just wait a moment." He bent over, hands on his knees, catching his breath. "Albert," Doug said, relief evident in his voice. "What is it?" The scientist straightened up, his eyes gleaming with a mix of excitement and fear. "I've been analyzing the data from Prometheus. It's not just a weapon, Doug. It's a key to understanding the observer's true intentions." This caught Amanda's attention. "Explain, Dr. Rosenberg, quickly." Albert nodded, pulling up a holographic display from a device on his wrist. "The quantum field generated by Prometheus. It's not just disrupting the aliens, it's creating a bridge of sorts. A way to communicate with the non-hostile faction of observers." A murmur ran through both groups. Trent leaned in, studying the complex equations swirling in the air. "You mean we could actually talk to them?" "Negotiate. Potentially," Albert confirmed, "but it's not that simple. The more we use Prometheus, the more we're changing ourselves at a quantum level. We're becoming something else, something between human and observer. The implications hung heavy in the air. Amanda's grip on her weapon tightened. All the more reason to contain this technology. We can't risk uncontrolled evolution of the human species. And who gets to control it? Doug challenged. Your committee. A handful of people making decisions for the entire human race. As the argument escalated, Trent found his attention drawn to the Prometheus device. Its soft blue glow seemed to pulse in time with his heartbeat. And he felt that strange resonance again, the sense that he could somehow understand its alien complexities. Without fully realizing what he was doing, Trent stepped towards Prometheus. His hand reached out, fingers brushing its smooth surface. "Trent, no!" Doug shouted, but it was too late. The moment Trent made contact, a surge of energy coursed through him. Images and sensations flooded his mind, vast cosmic vistas, strange alien consciousness, and a sense of immense, almost unbearable knowledge. When the surge subsided, Trent found himself on his knees, gasping. Everyone in the corridor stared at him, weapons half raised, unsure of what had just happened. "First I saw them," Trent managed to choke out. "The observers, their world, their plan." Doug rushed to his son's side, helping him to his feet. "What did you see, Trent?" "What plan?" Trent's eyes were wide, still seeing things beyond the confines of the corridor. "It's not an invasion, not really. It's an ascension. They want to help us evolve, to join them in some kind of cosmic awakening. But it's happening too fast, too chaotically. That's why some of them are hostile. They think we're not ready." Amanda stepped forward, her earlier coldness replaced by intense curiosity. "And the non-hostile faction, what do they want?" "To guide us," Trent said, "to help us navigate the change. But they need our cooperation, our willingness to embrace the unknown." A heavy silence fell over the group as they processed this information. The alarms, which had been blaring constantly, suddenly seemed distant and unimportant in the face of this cosmic revelation. Finally, Doug spoke. "We need to make a decision right now. Do we continue fighting, trying to stop a process that might be inevitable? Or do we try to work with the friendly observers to shape our own evolution?" Landry's voice crackled over the comms again. "Whatever you decide, make it fast. The rift is still expanding, and we've got reports of similar phenomena popping up all over the globe. This isn't just about Area 51 anymore, it's about the future of our entire species." Amanda holstered her weapon, her face a mask of conflicting emotions. "The Majestic 12 protocol for this scenario. It's called Ascension Protocol. We always thought it was theoretical, a worst-case scenario. But now it's reality," Doug finished. He turned to Trent, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "What do you think we should do?" Trent took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He looked around at the assembled faces, soldiers, scientists, bureaucrats, all waiting for an answer that could determine the course of human history. "I think," Trent said slowly, "that we need to embrace the change, but on our terms. We use Prometheus not as a weapon, but as a beacon. We call out to the friendly observers, ask for their guidance. But we make it clear that humanity's evolution will be our choice, not something forced upon us." Doug nodded, a proud smile spreading across his face. "Well said, son." He turned to Amanda. "Will the Majestic 12 support this course of action?" Amanda was silent for a long moment, internal calculations playing out behind her eyes. Finally, she nodded. "Unofficially, yes. But understand this, if things go sideways, if this ascension threatens humanity's existence, we will not hesitate to enact more permanent solutions." As if to underscore the gravity of the situation, another tremor shook the facility. The rift's expansion was accelerating, reality itself seeming to warp around them. "Then we're agreed," Doug said. "We move forward together, humanity's first steps into a larger universe." As they turned towards the growing rift, Prometheus humming with newfound purpose. Trent couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on the precipice of something monumental. The majestic 12 secrets had been laid bare, and with them the path to humanity's cosmic destiny. Whatever came next, there would be no going back. The age of secrecy was over. The age of ascension had begun. Chapter 18. Singularity. The air crackled with an otherworldly energy as Trent, Doug and the others raced towards the heart of Area 51. The Prometheus device hummed in Trent's arms, its blue glow pulsing erratically as if sensing the chaos unfolding around them. As they rounded a corner, they came face to face with a sight that stopped them dead in their tracks. The main atrium, once a bustling hub of scientific activity, had been transformed into a nightmare landscape of swirling energies and fractured reality. At the center of it all hung the rift, no longer a mere tear in space-time, but a yawning chasm that seemed to devour light itself. Tendrils of energy lashed out from its edges, warping the very fabric of reality wherever they touched. "My God," Amanda breathed, her earlier bravado faltering in the face of the cosmic horror before them. "It's growing exponentially." Doug's face was grim as he studied the readings on a nearby console. "The containment field is failing. If we don't do something fast, the rift will expand beyond the facility's limits." "How long do we have?" Landry demanded, his voice crackling over the comm system. "Hours, maybe less," Doug replied. "And once it breaches the surface, there's no telling how far it might spread." Trent's mind reeled at the implications. "You mean it could engulf the entire Southwest? The entire planet, potentially," Albert chimed in, his wild hair standing on end from the static charge in the air. "We're looking at a singularity event on a global scale." A heavy silence fell over the group as the true gravity of their situation sank in. They weren't just fighting for Area 51 anymore, or even for the United States. The fate of the entire world hung in the balance. "There has to be something we can do," Trent said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Dad, what about the observers?" "The friendly ones. Can't they help us?" Doug shook his head. "Even if we could contact them, I'm not sure they'd have the power to close something this big." "No, we need to think of another solution, something drastic." As if on cue, the rift pulsed violently, sending out a shockwave that knocked everyone off their feet. Alarms blared throughout the facility, and the very air seemed to vibrate with an otherworldly resonance. Trent stumbled to his feet, his ears ringing. As he helped his father up, he noticed something strange. The Prometheus device, which had been damaged in the fall, was emitting a new frequency. Its glow had changed from blue to a deep, pulsing purple. "Dad, look," Trent said, pointing to the device. "It's different." Doug's eyes widened as he examined Prometheus. "The quantum field, it's inverting. Trent, I think you might have accidentally discovered our solution." "What do you mean?" Amanda asked, limping over to join them. "The rift is essentially a breach in the quantum fabric of our universe," Doug explained, his words tumbling out rapidly as his mind raced. "But what if we could create an opposing force? A quantum singularity of our own." Albert's face lit up with understanding. "A controlled implosion to counteract the rift's expansion." "Doug, that's brilliant. But the energy requirements would be astronomical," Doug finished. "I know. That's why we'll need to use the rift's own energy against it. Like fighting fire with fire." Trent looked at his father, a mix of awe and fear in his eyes. "How would we even do that?" Doug's expression was grim. "We'd need to take Prometheus into the heart of the rift itself, trigger the implosion from inside." The implications hung heavy in the air. Amanda was the first to voice what they were all thinking. "That's a suicide mission, Clark. Whoever goes in there, they're not coming back." Doug nodded solemnly. "I know. That's why I'll do it myself." "No!" Trent shouted, grabbing his father's arm. "Dad, you can't. There has to be another way." "There isn't, son," Doug said softly, placing a hand on Trent's shoulder. "And it has to be me. I'm the only one who fully understands how Prometheus works, how to trigger the implosion at exactly the right moment." Tears welled up in Trent's eyes. "Then let me go with you. We can do it together." Doug shook his head, his eyes full of pride and sorrow. "You're needed here, Trent. Your connection to the observers, your ability to interface with their technology. You might be humanity's best hope for navigating whatever comes next." Before Trent could argue further, another violent tremor shook the facility. Cracks began to form in the walls and floor, glowing with the same eerie light as the rift. "We're out of time," Landry's voice crackled over the comms. "Whatever you're going to do, Clark, do it now. We've got reports of rift activity spreading across state lines. The military is mobilizing, but against this, conventional weapons will be useless." Doug took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. "All right, I'll need about 10 minutes to recalibrate Prometheus for the implosion. Amanda, get your people to evacuate everyone they can. Landry, we'll need a clear path to the rift." As the others sprang into action, Doug pulled Trent aside. "Son, I need you to listen carefully. There's a failsafe built into Prometheus. If something goes wrong, if I can't trigger the implosion manually, you'll need to do it remotely. The activation code is your mother's birthday." Trent nodded, struggling to keep his composure. I understand. But Dad, please, there has to be." Doug silenced him with a fierce hug. "I'm so proud of you, Trent, of the man you've become. Your mother would be too. Remember that, always." As father and son embraced for what they both knew might be the last time, the world around them descended further into chaos. The rift's expansion accelerated, reality itself seeming to fray at the edges. "It's time," Amanda called out, her voice strained. "Clark, are you ready?" Doug pulled away from Trent, wiping his eyes. "As ready as I'll ever be." "Son, whatever happens, know that I love you, and I'm sorry for all the years we lost." "I love you too, Dad," Trent choked out. With a final nod, Doug hefted Prometheus and turned towards the rift. The device's purple glow intensified, casting eerie shadows across his determined face. As Doug began his perilous journey towards the heart of the singularity, Trent watched with a mixture of terror and awe. The rift seemed to react to Prometheus's presence, its chaotic energies swirling and pulsing with increased fervor. The air grew thick with ozone and static electricity. Reality itself seemed to warp and twist around Doug as he pushed forward, each step bringing him closer to the event horizon. Just before he reached the rift's edge, Doug turned back one last time. His eyes met Trent's across the distorted space between them. No words were needed. In that moment, a lifetime of love, regret and hope passed between father and son. Then, with a flash of blinding light and a sound like the universe itself tearing apart, Doug Clark stepped into the rift. The singularity swallowed him whole, Prometheus's purple glow lost in the maelstrom of cosmic energies. Trent fell to his knees, overcome by the enormity of what had just happened. But even as grief threatened to consume him, he knew his job wasn't finished. The fate of the world now rested on his shoulders. With trembling hands, he pulled out the remote trigger for Prometheus. His finger hovered over the activation key, his mother's birthday seared into his memory. As the rift continued to expand, reality crumbling around them, Trent closed his eyes and silently prayed. Not just for his father's success, but for the future of humanity itself. The singularity loomed before them, a cosmic maw threatening to devour everything they knew. And in its heart, Douglas Clark fought his final battle, not just against alien invaders, but against the very laws of physics themselves. The fate of two universes hung in the balance, and the clock was ticking. Chapter 19, Exodus, the Nevada desert was alive with chaos. Military convoys thundered down highways, their headlights cutting through the eerie, pulsating glow that now dominated the night sky. Helicopters buzzed overhead, their searchlights sweeping across panicked crowds as an unprecedented evacuation unfolded. In the command center of Area 51, now a hive of frantic activity, General Landry barked orders into multiple communication channels. "I don't care what the governor says. We need those routes cleared now. This is a matter of global security. Trent stood at a bank of monitors, watching the unfolding crisis with a mix of awe and horror. Live feeds showed gridlocked roads, makeshift refugee camps springing up in parking lots, and the ominous, ever-expanding dome of energy centered on Area 51. "How many?" Trent asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Amanda, who had been coordinating with her majestic 12 contacts, looked up from her tablet. "Current estimates put it at over 2 million people in the immediate danger zone. But if the rift keeps expanding at this rate—" She didn't need to finish the thought. They all knew the stakes. Suddenly, an alarm blared from one of the security stations. A young technician's voice cut through the noise. "Sir, we've got a situation at the perimeter. A group of civilians just broke through the outer checkpoint." Landry cursed under his breath. Looters, conspiracy theorists. "No, sir," the technician replied, confusion evident in his voice. They're asking for Dr. Clark, by name." Trent's head snapped up. "What? Let me see." He rushed to the security feed, his heart pounding. The grainy night vision image showed a battered group of individuals being surrounded by armed guards. At their center stood a young woman, her face a mask of determination, as she held up what looked like an old journal. That's my grandmother's journal," Trent breathed. "But how?" Amanda was already moving. "Bring them in. Now, full security escort." Minutes later, the doors to the command center hissed open. Jenny Hawkins stumbled in, flanked by Elaine and the rest of her group. They looked exhausted, battered, but their eyes were alive with a fierce energy. "Trent Clark?" Jenny asked, her gaze locking onto him. Trent nodded, still trying to process this unexpected development. "Who are you? How do you know about—" "There's no time," Jenny cut him off, thrusting the journal into his hands. "Your grandmother, Sarah Clark. She knew this was coming, all of it, and she left instructions." As Trent flipped through the pages, his eyes widening at the familiar handwriting and diagrams that seemed to predict their current crisis with uncanny accuracy, Jenny quickly recounted their journey. The hidden bunker at Shadow Point, the alien technology they'd discovered, and the cryptic messages that had led them here. "Wait," Amanda interjected, her voice sharp. "You're saying there's another facility out there with technology we could use?" Elaine stepped forward, her military bearing evident despite her disheveled appearance. Shadow Point was Sarah Clark's failsafe. A backup plan in case. Well, in case of this. But it's more than just a bunker. It's a key. "A key to what?" Landry demanded. "To understanding the observers," Jenny replied, "and maybe to controlling the rift." A heavy silence fell over the room as the implications sank in. Trent's mind raced, trying to connect the dots between his grandmother's journal, the alien technology they'd been grappling with, and the desperate plan his father was even now attempting to execute. "Dad," Trent whispered, a sudden realization hitting him. He turned to the others, his voice urgent. "We need to get this information to my father. Now. Before he—" Another violent tremor shook the facility stronger than any before. Alarms blared as new warnings flashed across the monitors. "The rift's expansion is accelerating," Albert shouted from his station. "Energy readings are off the charts. We're looking at a potential breach of the upper atmosphere within the hour." Landry's face hardened. "We're out of time. Clark, whatever your father's planning, he needs to do it now. The Air Force is preparing a last-ditch nuclear strike if we can't close that rift." "No," Trent and Jenny shouted in unison. "You can't," Jenny continued, her voice desperate. "The journal, it warns specifically against using nuclear weapons. It would only accelerate the process, tear open rifts all across the planet." "Then what do you suggest?" Amanda asked, her earlier skepticism giving way to a grudging respect for the newcomers. Trent looked down at the journal, then at the Prometheus device's remote trigger he still carried. His grandmother's theories, his father's sacrifice. The alien technology they'd been struggling to understand, it all seemed to converge in this moment. "We combine everything," he said slowly, the plan forming in his mind. The Shadow Point tech, Prometheus, the rift itself. We don't just close it, we redirect it. Albert's eyes widened. You mean, use the rift as a portal? To where? To the observer's world, Trent replied, a hint of his father's determination in his voice. We bring the fight to them. The room erupted into a flurry of debate. Landry argued for a more conventional military approach, while Amanda insisted on consulting with the full Majestic 12 committee. But as the arguments raged, Jenny caught Trent's eye. A silent understanding passed between them. We don't have time for committees or protocols, Jenny said, her voice cutting through the noise. Sarah Clark prepared for this moment. She believed in humanity's potential to rise above our differences and face this threat united. Are we going to prove her right, or are we going to let petty squabbles doom our entire species? Her words hung in the air, challenging and inspiring. Slowly, the room fell silent. Landry was the first to speak. What do you need? Trent took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. We need to get to the rift chamber. And we need every bit of alien tech we can muster. Shadow Point, Prometheus, anything we've reverse-engineered. This is an all-or-nothing play. Amanda nodded, already tapping commands into a tablet. I'm authorizing full access to all Majestic 12 resources. God help us if this doesn't work. As the room burst into purposeful activity, Trent felt a hand on his arm. He turned to see Jenny, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that took his breath away. You're not alone in this, she said softly. Whatever happens next, we face it together. Trent managed a small smile, grateful for this unexpected ally. Together, he agreed. Outside, the evacuation continued, a river of headlights streaming away from the pulsing dome of alien energy. But within Area 51, a different movement was taking place. Scientists, soldiers and civilians alike rushed to gather equipment, synthesize theories, and prepare for one final, desperate push against the cosmic tide threatening to engulf them all. As Trent led the way towards the heart of the facility, his grandmother's journal clutched in one hand and the Prometheus trigger in the other, he couldn't shake the feeling that everything, his family's legacy, humanity's future, the very fate of two universes, was converging on this moment. The Exodus had brought them here to the precipice of either oblivion or transcendence. Now it was time to take the leap. Chapter 20, Guardians of the Galaxy. The rift chamber pulsed with otherworldly energy as Trent, Jenny, and their makeshift team of scientists and soldiers pushed through the final security checkpoint. The massive tear in reality loomed before them, its edges writhing and twisting in defiance of known physics. My God! Jenny breathed, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and terror. It's even worse than the journal described. Trent nodded grimly, his grip tightening on the Prometheus device. And it's still growing. We don't have much time. As they approached the bank of hastily assembled equipment surrounding the rift, Albert called out from his station. Energy readings are off the charts. Whatever we're going to do, we need to do it now. Trent took a deep breath, steeling himself for what came next. He turned to Jenny, his expression a mix of determination and fear. You ready? She nodded, clutching Sarah Clark's journal to her chest. As I'll ever be. Together they stepped forward, positioning themselves directly before the swirling vortex of the rift. Trent raised the Prometheus device, its purple glow intensifying as if in response to the rift's presence. Jenny opened the journal to a marked page, her fingers tracing the intricate diagrams and equations Sarah had left behind. Okay, Trent said, his voice barely audible over the rift's otherworldly hum. Here goes nothing. He activated Prometheus and immediately the air around them crackled with energy. The device's quantum field expanded, interacting with the rift in ways that sent cascades of light and shadow dancing across the chamber. Jenny began to read from the journal, her voice growing stronger with each word. The language was unlike anything Trent had ever heard, a mix of mathematical formulae and what sounded like an alien tongue. As their efforts intensified, the rift's chaotic movements began to slow. The swirling energies coalesced, forming patterns that seemed almost intentional. Suddenly, a beam of light shot from the rift, enveloping Trent and Jenny. Trent heard shouts of alarm from the others, but they sounded distant, muffled. In that moment, all he could focus on was the presence that now filled his mind. It was vast, ancient, and utterly alien, yet somehow Trent could understand it. We are the observers, the presence communicated, not in words but in concepts that bloomed directly in Trent's consciousness. We have waited long for this moment. Who? What are you? Trent managed to think back. We are the guardians of this galaxy, came the reply. Shepherds of young races. Protectors against the darkness that lurks between the stars. Images flooded Trent's mind, countless worlds, alien civilizations rising and falling, and through it all, the watchful presence of the observers. But the invasion, Trent thought, confusion and anger swirling within him. Why attack us if you're supposed to be guardians? A sense of sadness emanated from the alien consciousness. Not an attack, a test, a crucible to forge your potential. More images flashed before Trent's inner eye. He saw the long history of the observer's interactions with Earth, from the first primitive humans gazing up at the stars to the Roswell incident to the present crisis. Throughout it all, the observers had been guiding, nudging humanity towards a greater destiny. Your species stands at a crossroads, the observers continued. The rift is more than a tear in space-time. It is a gateway to cosmic awareness, to powers beyond your current comprehension. But such power comes with great responsibility. Trent understood then. The invasion, the chaos, it had all been a test to see if humanity was ready to take its place among the stars. And if we fail this test, Trent asked, though he feared he already knew the answer. A sense of grim finality washed over him. Then the rift will close, and with it, humanity's chance at ascension. Your world will be sealed off, left to face the coming darkness alone. The gravity of the situation hit Trent like a physical blow. This wasn't just about saving Earth from an alien invasion. It was about securing humanity's place in a vast, complex universe filled with wonders and terrors beyond imagination. As this realization solidified, Trent became aware of Jenny beside him. Somehow, impossibly, she was sharing in this cosmic communication. Her mind brushed against his, a beacon of warmth and determination in the overwhelming flood of alien consciousness. You are not alone in this, Jenny's thoughts echoed, intertwining with the observer's presence. We face this together. With their combined strength, Trent and Jenny pushed back against the vast alien intellect, asserting humanity's right to choose its own path. We understand the stakes, Trent communicated, his mental voice growing stronger, but we won't be passive pawns in your cosmic game. If we're to join you among the stars, it will be on our terms. A sense of approval radiated from the observers. This is the spark we have waited for, the potential we have nurtured through the ages, but the final step must be yours alone. The alien presence began to recede, leaving behind a gift, knowledge, terrible and wonderful, of what needed to be done. As Trent and Jenny came back to themselves, gasping and trembling from the intensity of the experience, they found the chamber in an uproar. Alarms blared and the rift pulsed with renewed vigor. What happened? Landry demanded, his face a mask of concern and confusion. You two went catatonic for almost 10 minutes. 10 minutes, Jenny said, dazed. It felt like an eternity, Trent finished. He looked down at Prometheus, then back at the rift. We know what we have to do now. But it's not going to be easy. Albert rushed over, his wild hair even more disheveled than usual. The rift's expansion has accelerated exponentially. We're detecting similar anomalies forming all over the globe. Whatever you learned in there, we need to act on it now. Trent nodded, his expression hardening with resolve. The observers showed us the truth. This isn't just about closing the rift. It's about using it, transforming it into a gateway that will propel humanity into a new era. But the risks, Amanda began, her earlier skepticism creeping back into her voice, are enormous, Trent acknowledged. But the alternative is extinction. If we fail, Earth will be cut off from the galactic community, left defenseless against threats we can barely comprehend. Jenny stepped forward, her eyes blazing with determination. Sarah Clark knew this day would come. Everything in her journal, the calculations, the warnings, it was all leading to this moment. We have to trust in the legacy she left us. A heavy silence fell over the chamber as the weight of the decision pressed down on them all. The fate of not just Earth, but humanity's cosmic destiny hung in the balance. Landry was the first to speak. "What do you need us to do?" Trent took a deep breath, feeling the mantle of leadership settle onto his shoulders. "We need to modify Prometheus, integrate it with the Shadowpoint technology Jenny brought. And we'll need every ounce of power this facility can generate." As the team sprang into action, Trent and Jenny huddled over Sarah's journal, cross-referencing its arcane formulas with the knowledge the observers had imparted. The plan that emerged was audacious, terrifying, and quite possibly humanity's only hope. They would use Prometheus not to close the rift, but to stabilize and expand it, creating a controlled gateway to the stars. The process would irrevocably change Earth and everyone on it, ushering in an age of unprecedented growth and evolution. But it would also expose humanity to the vast, often hostile universe that awaited them. As the final preparations were made, Trent found himself standing before the rift once more. Its swirling energies seemed to call to him now, a siren song of cosmic potential. Jenny appeared at his side, her hand finding his. "You know what this means, don't you?" she said softly. "If we succeed, nothing will ever be the same." Trent nodded, squeezing her hand.
I know, but it's like you said, we're in this together.
Around them, the combined might of human ingenuity and alien technology hummed to life. Prometheus pulsed with newfound power, its quantum field expanding to encompass the entire chamber. "All systems a go," Albert called out. "It's now or never." Trent looked at Jenny one last time, saw the same mix of fear and exhilaration he felt mirrored in her eyes. Then, together, they stepped forward to meet humanity's destiny. The rift flared with blinding light, and for a moment, Trent thought he could see the infinite expanse of the cosmos stretching out before them. Countless worlds, unimaginable wonders, and yes, terrible dangers, all waiting to be explored.
As the gateway to the stars yawned open, Trent sent out one final thought to the watching observers. "We're ready."
Let the journey begin. The universe, vast and mysterious, seemed to hold its breath. And then, with a surge of power that shook the very foundations of reality, humanity took its first step into a larger world. The age of cosmic awakening had begun. Chapter 21, 0 Hour. The air around Area 51 crackled with otherworldly energy as Trent, Jenny, and their makeshift army of scientists and soldiers made their final push towards the rift chamber. The facility shuddered under the strain of the expanding dimensional tier, alarms blaring a constant reminder of the apocalypse they were racing to prevent. Status report. Landry barked into his comm unit as they rounded another corner, narrowly avoiding a shower of sparks from a malfunctioning control panel. "Not good, sir," came the strained reply. "The rift's expansion has accelerated beyond our models. We're looking at total structural failure within the hour." Trent exchanged a grim look with Jenny. "We're cutting it close," he said, adjusting his grip on the modified Prometheus device. Its purple glow pulsed erratically as if sensing the chaos around it. "We'll make it," Jenny assured him, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her own uncertainty. "We have to." As they approached the final security checkpoint before the rift chamber, a bone-chilling shriek echoed through the corridors. The sound of gunfire erupted ahead, followed by panicked shouts. "Hostiles incoming!" Amanda yelled, raising her weapon. "Defensive positions now," The team barely had time to take cover before a wave of alien entities surged around the corner. They were a nightmarish fusion of organic and mechanical parts, their bodies twisting and reforming as they advanced. "Open fire!" Landry commanded, and the air filled with the high-pitched whine of energy weapons. Trent watched in awe and terror as beams of superheated plasma tore through the alien ranks. But for every entity that fell, two more seemed to take its place. The air grew thick with acrid smoke and the otherworldly ichor that passed for the invaders' blood. "We can't stay here!" Albert shouted over the din of battle. "The longer we wait, the stronger the rift grows." Trent nodded, his mind racing. "We need a diversion, something to draw them off while a smaller team pushes through to the chamber." Jenny's eyes lit up with sudden inspiration. She pulled Sarah's journal from her pack, flipping frantically through its pages. "Here," she exclaimed, pointing to a complex diagram. "Your grandmother theorized about using quantum resonance to disrupt the alien's hive mind. If we can amplify the signal from Prometheus, we could create a psychic smokescreen," Trent finished, catching on to her idea. "But we'd need a massive power source to broadcast it facility-wide." Amanda, overhearing their conversation, called out between bursts of gunfire, "The backup generators in sub-level C. If we can reroute the power—" "I'm on it," Albert interrupted, already tapping commands into his tablet. "But I'll need to get to the main junction box to manually override the safeties." Landry's face hardened with resolve. "All right, people, listen up. We're splitting into two teams. Clark, Hawkins, you take a small group and make for the rift chamber. The rest of us will hold the line here and buy you time." "Sir?" Trent began to protest, but Landry cut him off. "This isn't a democracy, son. You're our best shot at closing that rift. We'll keep these bastards busy as long as we can." The gravity of the moment settled over the group. These could be their final goodbyes. Amanda approached Trent, her earlier skepticism replaced by grim respect. "For what it's worth, Clark, I think your father would be proud." She pressed a small device into his hand. "Emergency transponder. If by some miracle we survive this, we'll come find you." Trent nodded, words failing him. He turned to see Jenny saying a tearful goodbye to Elaine, the two women embracing fiercely. "All right, enough sentimentality," Landry growled, though his voice was thick with emotion. "You've got a world to save. Now move out." With a final nod to their comrades, Trent and Jenny led their small team down a side corridor, the sounds of battle fading behind them. They moved swiftly through the twisting hallways, guided by the pulsing glow of Prometheus and the enigmatic diagrams in Sarah's journal. As they neared the rift chamber, the very fabric of reality seemed to warp around them. Gravity fluctuated wildly, forcing them to fight for every step. Strange, ghostly apparitions flickered at the edges of their vision, echoes of other worlds bleeding through the thinning dimensional barriers. "We're close," Jenny gasped, her face pale with the strain of the alien environment. "Just a little further." Her words were cut off by a deafening roar. The corridor ahead of them twisted impossibly, and from its depths emerged a monstrous figure. It was massive, easily 3 times the size of a human, its body a writhing mass of tentacles and crystalline structures. "Guardian," Trent breathed, recognizing the entity from the visions the observers had shared. This was no mere foot soldier, but a powerful being tasked with protecting the rift. The creature's baleful gaze fell upon them, and Trent felt the weight of eons pressing down on his mind. In that moment he understood that no conventional weapon could hope to harm this cosmic sentinel, but they were out of options. With a cry of defiance, Trent raised Prometheus, channeling every ounce of power he could muster into the device. The purple glow intensified, becoming a searing beam of energy that lanced towards the Guardian. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, with a sound like reality itself tearing, a rift opened within the Guardian's crystalline core. The creature thrashed in agony, its form beginning to collapse in on itself. "Run!" Trent shouted, grabbing Jenny's hand. They sprinted past the disintegrating Guardian, its death throes shaking the very foundations of Area 51. They burst into the rift chamber, and for a moment all they could do was stare in awe at the sight before them. The rift had grown to encompass nearly the entire room, a swirling maelstrom of cosmic energies that hurt to look at directly. And there, silhouetted against the heart of the rift, was a familiar figure. "Dad!" Trent whispered, his voice choked with emotion. Doug Clark turned, his face etched with fatigue and an otherworldly light. "Trent," he said, his voice echoing strangely, "you made it." "How?" Trent began, but Doug shook his head. "No time to explain the plan. It won't work. Not completely. The rift, it's grown too powerful. If we collapse it now, the backlash will tear the planet apart." Jenny stepped forward, Sarah's journal clutched to her chest. "Then we modify the plan. Your mother's research, Trent. She didn't just theorize about closing the rift, she found a way to control it." Understanding dawned in Doug's eyes. "Of course. Not a collapse, but a controlled implosion. Channeling the energy. To punch through to the observer's realm," Trent finished. "Creating a stable gateway." Doug nodded, a proud smile spreading across his face despite the dire circumstances. "That's my boy." "All right, let's do this. Together." As father and son worked feverishly to recalibrate Prometheus, Jenny read aloud from Sarah's journal, her voice rising above the thunderous roar of the rift. The air around them shimmered with possibilities, reality itself seeming to hold its breath in anticipation. A violent tremor shook the chamber, nearly knocking them off their feet. Through the open doorway they could hear the sounds of battle growing closer. Their time was running out. "It's now or never," Doug said, his hand hovering over the final activation sequence. He turned to Trent, his eyes filled with a lifetime of unspoken emotions. "Son, I know, Dad," Trent said, gripping his father's shoulder. "Me too." With a nod of understanding, Doug pressed the button. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a sound like 1,000 thunderclaps, Prometheus unleashed its full power. A blinding column of energy erupted from the device, connecting with the heart of the rift. The cosmic tear began to twist and contort, its chaotic energies being funneled and reshaped by the combined will of 3 generations of Clarks. As the rift's transformation reached its crescendo, Trent felt a tugging sensation, as if every atom of his being was being pulled towards the swirling vortex. He grabbed onto Jenny with one hand, his father with the other, determined that whatever came next, they would face it together. The last thing Trent saw before the light engulfed them was the rift collapsing inward, reshaping itself into a shimmering, stable portal. A gateway to a new era for humanity. Then, with a final pulse of energy that shook Area 51 to its very foundations, the world around them vanished in a flash of blinding white light. The 0 hour had come and gone, and in its wake, the fate of 2 universes hung in the balance. Chapter 22. Beyond the infinite, the rift chamber pulsed with an otherworldly light, casting long, shifting shadows across the faces of Trent, Jenny, and Doug. The modified Prometheus device hummed with barely contained power, its energy output fluctuating in sync with the swirling vortex before them. "It's not enough," Doug said, his voice strained as he studied the readings on a nearby console. "The rift's expansion is outpacing our ability to contain it. We need more power." Trent's mind raced, desperately seeking a solution. "What if we rerouted energy from the facility's main reactor?" Doug shook his head grimly. "It wouldn't be enough. And even if it was, we'd never get it here in time." He paused, his eyes fixed on the rift. "There's only one way." The weight of those words hung heavy in the air. Trent felt a chill run down his spine as he realized what his father was implying. "Dad, no. There has to be another way." Doug turned to face his son, his expression a mixture of determination and sorrow. "Prometheus was never meant to be operated remotely, Trent. Its full potential can only be unlocked from within the rift itself." "But that's suicide!" Jenny exclaimed, her voice cracking with emotion. "Maybe," Doug replied, a wry smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Or maybe it's the greatest adventure a scientist could hope for." Trent shook his head vehemently, tears welling in his eyes. "I won't let you do this. We just found each other again. I can't lose you now." Doug placed his hands on Trent's shoulders, his gaze steady and full of love. "Son, listen to me. Everything I've done, everything I've sacrificed, it was all for this moment, to give humanity a chance, to give you a future." He glanced at Jenny, then back to Trent. "Your grandmother saw this coming. She prepared you both for this day. Now it's time for you to carry on the legacy, to be the bridge between Earth and the stars." A violent tremor shook the chamber, sending cascades of debris raining down from the ceiling. The rift pulsed ominously, its edges bleeding out into the surrounding space. "We're out of time," Doug said, his voice urgent. He turned to Jenny. "The journal. There should be instructions for stabilizing the rift once Prometheus is activated from the inside." Jenny nodded, tears streaming down her face as she flipped through the pages with trembling hands. "Here," she said, pointing to a complex diagram. "But Doug, once you're inside, there's no guarantee we can—" "I know," he interrupted gently. "Just promise me you'll look after each other. And Trent," he paused, his voice thick with emotion, "I'm so proud of the man you've become. Your mother would be too." Trent felt his resolve crumbling. He pulled his father into a fierce embrace, years of unspoken feelings pouring out in a single moment. "I love you, Dad," he choked out. "I love you too, son," Doug replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "More than you'll ever know." With a final lingering look at his son, Doug turned and strode towards the rift. He paused at its edge, the swirling energies casting an ethereal glow across his features. For a moment he looked young again, the brilliant, adventurous scientist who had first unraveled the mysteries of the cosmos. "See you on the other side," Doug said with a grin. Then, clutching Prometheus to his chest, he stepped into the void. The instant Doug crossed the threshold, the rift's behavior changed dramatically. Its chaotic swirling coalesced into intricate, fractal-like patterns. Waves of energy pulsed outward, each one more intense than the last. "It's working!" Jenny shouted over the rising din. "The rift is starting to collapse in on itself." Trent watched in awe as reality itself seemed to bend and warp around the shrinking portal. But even as hope surged within him, a new alarm blared from the console. "What's happening?" he asked, rushing to Jenny's side. Her face was pale as she studied the readings. "The energy build-up, it's too much. If we don't find a way to channel it, the backlash could tear apart half the continent." Trent's mind raced. Then, with sudden clarity, he remembered his grandmother's words from the journal. "The key," he muttered. "We're not just closing the rift, we're reshaping it." He placed his hands on the console, feeling the same strange resonance he'd experienced when activating Prometheus. Somehow, he knew exactly which controls to manipulate, which energies to direct. "Jenny!" he called out, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "I need you to read from the journal. The passage about quantum entanglement and dimensional anchoring." As Jenny's voice rose above the maelstrom, reciting Sarah Clark's arcane formulas, Trent felt something shift within him. It was as if he could see the underlying fabric of reality, the cosmic strings that bound all of existence together. With sure movements, he began to weave those strings, using the rift's own energy to create something new. A bridge between worlds, stable and controlled. The chamber shook violently, equipment sparking and exploding around them. But Trent stood firm, his consciousness expanded beyond the confines of his physical form. In that moment he understood what his father and grandmother had been working towards all along. This wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. With a final, reality-shattering pulse, the rift collapsed in on itself. But instead of disappearing entirely, it transformed. The swirling vortex condensed into a shimmering, opalescent sphere about the size of a beach ball, hovering serenely in the center of the chamber. Silence fell, broken only by the soft hum emanating from the sphere. "Is it over?" Jenny asked hesitantly, stepping closer to Trent. He nodded, a mixture of exhaustion and wonder washing over him. "For now, we didn't just close the rift. We transformed it into a controllable gateway. And your father?" Jenny's voice was soft, hesitant. Trent stared at the sphere, his heart aching. "I don't know, But if there's a way back, he'll find it. He always does. As if in response to his words, the sphere pulsed once, a brief pattern of lights dancing across its surface. A message, a sign. Trent couldn't be sure, but he felt a glimmer of hope ignite within him. The sound of approaching footsteps broke the moment. Landry burst into the chamber, followed by a battered but triumphant group of survivors. "My God," the general breathed, taking in the scene before him. "You actually did it." Trent managed a weary smile. "We had help," he said, glancing at Jenny and then back to the sphere. "A lot of help." As the room filled with the sounds of relieved laughter and congratulations, Trent found his gaze drawn back to the shimmering gateway. Somewhere beyond that opalescent barrier, his father was exploring wonders beyond imagination, and perhaps, just perhaps, finding a way home. The crisis had been averted, but Trent knew this was only the beginning. Humanity had taken its first stumbling steps into a larger universe. The real journey, filled with challenges, discoveries, and untold possibilities, was just beginning. And as he stood there, Jenny's hand finding his, Trent felt ready to face whatever lay beyond the infinite. Chapter 23. Brave New World. The Nevada sun rose over a changed world. As the first rays of light pierced the dissipating clouds of alien energy, they illuminated a landscape transformed. The desert around Area 51 was scarred with strange crystalline formations and patches of otherworldly vegetation, permanent reminders of the cosmic battle that had raged just hours before. Trent Clark stood at the entrance of the facility, squinting against the dawn. Beside him, Jenny Hawkins leaned heavily on his shoulder, both of them exhausted but unable to sleep. The events of the past few days felt like a surreal dream at the weight of the sphere in Trent's hand. The transformed rift, now contained and controlled, was undeniably real. "What happens now?" Jenny asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Before Trent could answer, the sound of approaching vehicles drew their attention. A convoy of military and government SUVs wound its way through the debris-strewn access road, kicking up dust in their wake. "Now," Trent said with a wry smile, "we face the music." As the vehicles came to a stop, a familiar figure emerged from the lead car. Amanda, the majestic 12 representative, looked considerably worse for wear, but carried herself with the same air of authority. "Mr. Clark," she said, approaching them. "Miss Hawkins, on behalf of the President and the Joint Chiefs, I've been asked to convey their deepest gratitude for your actions in averting a global catastrophe." Trent raised an eyebrow. "Just their gratitude?" Amanda's lips twitched in what might have been a smile. "For now. There will be debriefings, of course, and discussions about the future of this facility and its unique assets." Her eyes flickered to the sphere in Trent's hand. "With all due respect," Jenny interjected, "I don't think you fully understand what's happened here. This isn't just about national security anymore. The whole world has changed." As if to underscore her point, a distant rumble drew their attention to the sky. A formation of sleek, unfamiliar aircraft soared overhead, reverse-engineered alien tech that had been pressed into service during the crisis. Amanda nodded, her expression somber. "Believe me, we're acutely aware of that fact, which is why I'm here to offer you both a proposition." Before she could elaborate, General Landry emerged from the facility, followed by Albert and a group of haggard but determined-looking scientists and soldiers. "Clark," Landry called out, "we've got a situation. You're going to want to see this." Exchanging a glance with Jenny, Trent followed the group back into the heart of Area 51. As they entered the main control room, he was struck by how different it looked. Alien-derived technology had been integrated seamlessly with human systems, creating a hybrid environment that hummed with potential. Albert gestured to a large holographic display dominating the center of the room. "We've been monitoring global communications and satellite feeds. The footage coming in. Well, see for yourself." The display flickered to life, showing a montage of scenes from around the world. In Times Square, crowds gathered around massive screens displaying footage of the alien ships. In Beijing, scientists pored over fragments of alien technology. In Rio de Janeiro, Strange, shimmering portals, miniature versions of the rift hung in the air, defying the laws of physics. "It's happening everywhere," Trent breathed. Landry nodded grimly. "The cat's out of the bag. There's no putting it back in. The whole damn world knows we're not alone in the universe. And they're demanding answers," Amanda added. "Which brings me back to my proposition. The President is forming a new agency, one dedicated to managing our transition into this new era of cosmic awareness. We want you to lead it, Mr. Clark." Trent blinked in surprise. "Me? But I'm not." "You're the one who closed the rift," Amanda interrupted. "You have a unique understanding of the technology involved, not to mention a seemingly innate ability to interface with it. Plus, you have the trust of the alien factions that aided us." Jenny squeezed Trent's hand supportively. "She's right. You're the perfect bridge between our world and theirs." Trent's mind raced. The responsibility was enormous, but he couldn't deny the pull he felt towards this new frontier. It was his father's legacy, his grandmother's vision, and now, it seemed, his destiny. "All right," he said finally. "I'll do it, but on one condition: full transparency. No more secrets, no more cover-ups. The world deserves to know the truth." Amanda hesitated, then nodded. "Agreed. Within reason, of course. There are still threats out there we need to be cautious of." As if on cue, an alarm blared from one of the consoles. A young technician called out, her voice tense. "Sir, we're detecting an energy signature similar to the rift, but it's on the moon." The room erupted into a flurry of activity. As Trent moved to examine the readings, he felt a familiar resonance, the same sensation he'd experienced when interfacing with Prometheus. "It's them," he said, certainty filling his voice. "The observers, they're reaching out." Jenny joined him at the console, her eyes wide. "What do they want?" Trent closed his eyes, focusing on the faint signal pulsing at the edge of his consciousness. "They're inviting us, challenging us to take the next step." Landry frowned. "The moon. We barely have a permanent base up there, let alone the capability to investigate an alien presence." "Then we'll build it," Trent said, a fire igniting within him. "We have the technology now. We have the knowledge. And we have the motivation." He turned to address the room, feeling the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. "This is our chance to redefine what it means to be human, to reach beyond our planet, beyond our solar system. But we have to do it right. We have to learn from our mistakes, from the secrets and lies that almost doomed us." Trent held up the sphere containing the transformed rift. "This isn't just a weapon or a tool, it's a key to a universe of possibilities, and it's up to us to decide how to use it." As he spoke, Trent could almost feel his father's presence, could almost hear his voice urging him forward. The loss still ached, but alongside it burned a fierce determination to honor Doug's sacrifice. "So, what do you say?" Trent asked, looking around at the assembled faces. Scientists, soldiers, government officials, all united by their shared experience of the extraordinary. "Are we ready to take the next giant leap?" The response was immediate and resounding. Cheers erupted, mingled with determined nods and excited chatter about the possibilities that lay ahead. As the room buzzed with renewed energy and purpose, Jenny pulled Trent aside. "You know this won't be easy, right? There will be resistance, fear, those who want to exploit this new knowledge for their own gain." Trent nodded, his expression serious. "I know. But we've seen what happens when we let fear and secrecy dictate our actions. This time, we do it differently. We do it together." He glanced at the sphere in his hand, then back at the bustling control room. In that moment, Trent could almost see the future unfolding before him, a future of exploration, discovery, and challenges beyond imagination. The brave new world they had fought so hard to protect was just the beginning. The real adventure, humanity's journey to the stars, was about to begin. And Trent Clark, son of Douglas, grandson of Sarah, was ready to lead the way. Chapter 24. Echoes of tomorrow. 6 months had passed since the day the world changed forever. Trent Clark stood at the window of his office, gazing out at the transformed landscape of Area 51. The facility, once shrouded in secrecy, now bustled with activity as the heart of Earth's new interstellar initiative. Crystalline structures, remnants of the alien incursion, glittered in the Nevada sun, but instead of ominous reminders, they now served as foundations for Earth's first true spaceport. Hybrid craft, melding human ingenuity with alien technology, soared overhead, their sleek forms a testament to how far humanity had come in such a short time. A soft chime drew Trent's attention back to his desk. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing Jenny's face. Even through the projection, her excitement was palpable. "Trent, you need to see this," she said, her eyes shining. "The Lunar team just made contact with the observer outpost. We're receiving data streams unlike anything we've ever seen." Trent couldn't help but smile at her enthusiasm. "I'll be right there. Have you notified the other members of the council?" Jenny nodded. "They're assembling now. But Trent, there's something else. We're picking up anomalous readings from the Kuiper Belt. It could be nothing, but given our track record, it's probably something," Trent finished. "All right, I'm on my way." As the projection faded, Trent's gaze fell on the framed photo on his desk. It showed him standing with his father, both grinning in front of an old hangar. The image was from years ago, before the weight of cosmic secrets had settled on their shoulders. Trent felt a familiar pang of loss, tempered by pride and determination. "We did it, Dad," he murmured. "We're reaching for the stars. I just wish you were here to see it." With a deep breath, Trent straightened his jacket, the new uniform of the Cosmic Exploration and Defense Initiative SETI, and headed for the door. As he walked through the corridors of the renamed Douglas Clark Center for Extraterrestrial Studies, he marveled at how quickly the world had adapted to its new reality. The control room was a hive of activity when Trent arrived. Holographic displays filled the air, showing everything from lunar surface maps to deep space telemetry. At the center of it all stood Jenny, directing the flow of information with the ease of a seasoned conductor. "What have we got?" Trent asked, stepping up to the main console. Albert, his wild hair now streaked with more grey than before, turned to greet him. "It's extraordinary, Trent. The observers have provided us with a map of nearby star systems, complete with annotations on potential alien civilizations. It's like they're giving us a guidebook to the galaxy." "Or a warning," Amanda interjected, her face grim on one of the communication screens. The former Majestic 12 operative now served as Earth's ambassador to the fledgling Galactic Council. "Don't forget, not all the species out there are friendly. The observers might be preparing us for future conflicts." Trent nodded, studying the intricate star map hovering before him. "You're both right. This is an opportunity and a responsibility. We need to proceed carefully." He turned to Jenny. "What about those readings from the Kuiper Belt?" Jenny's fingers danced over the controls, bringing up a new set of data. "It's strange. We're detecting gravitational anomalies consistent with a small planetoid, but it wasn't there in our last survey. It's as if it just appeared." A murmur ran through the room. Trent felt a familiar tingle at the base of his skull, the same sensation he'd experienced when interfacing with alien technology. Could it be a ship? Something big enough to have its own gravity well? "Possible," Albert mused, "but why would it be hiding out there? And more importantly, whose is it?" Before anyone could speculate further, a new alarm blared. One of the technicians called out, "Sir, we're detecting a massive energy surge from the moon. It's the observer outpost. They're activating something." All eyes turned to the main screen, where a live feed from the lunar base showed a massive structure rising from the moon's surface. It was unlike anything they had ever seen, a towering spire of light and energy reaching towards the stars. "My God," someone whispered. "What is it?" Trent's mind raced, connecting dots that only he could see. The star map, The anomaly in the Kuiper Belt, this new lunar construct, it all fit together in a pattern just beyond his full comprehension. "It's a beacon," he said, certainty filling his voice. "The observers are calling out to someone, or warning them." Amanda's voice cut through the tension. "Clark, we need to make a decision. Do we attempt to interfere with the beacon, or do we wait and see what answers its call?" Trent closed his eyes, reaching out with that strange new sense he'd developed since the Rift incident. For a moment he thought he could feel the vastness of space, the countless civilizations teeming among the stars, and somewhere out there, a presence that felt achingly familiar. "We wait," he said finally, opening his eyes. "But we prepare. Jenny, I want every scrap of data from that beacon analyzed. Albert, work with the engineering team to fast-track our deep space vessels. If we're about to have visitors, I want us ready to meet them on equal footing." As the room erupted into action, Trent felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to see Elaine, the former soldier who had become one of his most trusted advisors. "You really think he's still out there, don't you?" she asked softly. "Your father." Trent nodded, his gaze drawn back to the star map. "I can feel it, Elaine. Whatever's coming, whatever the observers are preparing us for, Dad's a part of it, and we need to be ready." As if in response to his words, the lunar beacon pulsed, sending out a wave of energy that washed over the Earth. In that moment, every human on the planet felt a shiver of anticipation, a sense that they stood on the brink of something monumental. The brave new world they had fought for was about to face its first true test. And as Trent Clark looked out at the bustling control room, at the dedicated men and women who had chosen to face the unknown alongside him, he felt a surge of pride and determination. Whatever echoes of tomorrow awaited them among the stars, humanity would face them together. Countless light-years away, in a realm beyond human comprehension, Douglas Clark opened his eyes. The world around him was a swirling tapestry of energy and possibility, nothing like the solid reality he had known on Earth. His body, if it could still be called that, felt both infinitely vast and impossibly small. As his awareness expanded, Doug felt the presence of the observers all around him. They were not the benevolent guardians he had once imagined, nor were they the hostile invaders some had feared. They were something else, something beyond. "Welcome, Douglas Clark," a chorus of thoughts echoed in his mind. "You have transcended. You have become. And now you must choose." Images flooded Doug's consciousness. Countless worlds, civilizations rising and falling, cosmic dramas playing out across the tapestry of space-time. And at the center of it all, a growing darkness, a threat that loomed over not just humanity, but all sentient life in the galaxy. "Your people stand at a crossroads," the observers continued. "They have taken their first steps into a larger universe. But the path ahead is fraught with danger. They will need a guide, a protector." Doug felt a pull, a longing for the world he had left behind, for his son who he knew was carrying on his legacy. But he also felt the weight of this new responsibility, the potential to shape the destiny of not just humanity, but countless species across the cosmos. As he pondered his choice, Doug became aware of a distant signal, a beacon reaching out across the vast expanse of space. And with it, a familiar presence, Trent. In that moment, Douglas Clark made his decision. He would find a way to bridge these two realms, to be both father and cosmic guardian, to protect humanity while guiding them towards their true potential among the stars. "I'm coming, son," Doug thought, his consciousness expanding to encompass the vast network of alien intelligence around him. The journey is just beginning. And with that, Douglas Clark, scientist, father, and now something far more, set out across the cosmic sea, ready to face whatever wonders and terrors awaited in the endless echoes of tomorrow. The end.